Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Outsider. Vincent Mercer could measure his worth to the Davidson family with perfect precision. Absolutely nothing. 10 years of marriage to Natalie, a decade of family gatherings, and he remained the perpetual outsider, the man who was tolerated but never embraced. Today's spectacle at Harold Davidson's retirement party only confirmed what Vincent had always known. The banquet hall buzzed with conversation and laughter, crystal glasses clinked, and the smell of expensive cuisine filled the air. Harold Davidson had spared no expense to celebrate his 40 years in construction, building Davidson Enterprises from nothing into a regional powerhouse. Vincent sat quietly at the family table, observing. The Davidsons operated like a private club, old money wrapping itself around new influence, protecting their own with fierce loyalty. Next to him, Natalie sparkled in her designer dress, laughing with her cousins, barely acknowledging his presence. Their marriage had been cooling for months, but appearances needed to be maintained. "If I could have everyone's attention," Harold's booming voice called out. The room fell silent as the patriarch stood, gray hair perfectly coiffed, command in his posture. Today marks the end of an era, but the beginning of a legacy. Vincent studied the man who had never hidden his disappointment that his only daughter had married a self-made contractor rather than one of the polished trust fund candidates he'd preferred. Vincent had built his construction company from scratch, specializing in precision renovations of historical properties, work requiring both artistry and engineering skill. But to Harold, Vincent would always be the rough-handed laborer who'd stolen his princess. "As I step away from the helm of Davidson Enterprises," Harold continued, "I want to recognize the family that supported me through every challenge and triumph." One by one, family members were called forward. Harold's brothers received vintage watches from their father's collection. Nephews and nieces accepted envelopes containing deeds to vacation properties or stock certificates. Natalie's mother wiped away tears as she was presented with a diamond necklace to match the sparkle in her eyes that had captured his heart 45 years ago. Then came Natalie's turn. Harold's voice softened as he called his daughter forward, presenting her with a small wooden box. "The Davidson sapphires," he announced. "5 generations of Davidson women have worn them on their most important days. Now they're yours to cherish." Vincent watched his wife's eyes fill with tears as she embraced her father. He didn't expect anything himself, had never expected anything, so the surprise came not from being overlooked but from what happened next. "Vincent," Natalie appeared beside him, holding not a gift but a serving tray. "Could you take this back to the kitchen? They're short-staffed." He looked at the tray, then at his wife's expectant face. "You want me to bust tables at your father's retirement party?" "Don't make a scene," she whispered, her smile fixed for any watching eyes. "You're not real family. Just help out." The tray felt cold in his hands. 10 years. A decade of trying to earn a place at this table. Vincent stood, dignity intact, and turned toward the kitchen doors. "Actually," Harold's voice rang out, "there's one thing I saved for last." Vincent paused, the weight of eyes on his back. "Vincent, would you join me up here, son?" The room fell silent. Vincent set down the tray and approached the podium, feeling Natalie's stunned gaze following him. Harold placed a hand on Vincent's shoulder. 10 years ago, I thought my daughter had made a terrible mistake." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I saw only a contractor without pedigree or connections. What I failed to see was a man of vision and integrity." Vincent maintained his composure, though inside, conflict churned. After years of cold shoulders and thinly veiled condescension, Harold's sudden warmth felt suspect. While others in this family were born to privilege, Harold continued, Vincent built his success brick by brick with his own hands. He turned to face Vincent directly. "You've proven me wrong in every way that matters, and I'm man enough to admit it." Harold reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "This isn't a gift, Vincent. It's something you've earned." He handed over the envelope. "The Westbrook Estate renovation contract. The Historical Commission unanimously selected your bid, though they don't know I've added a personal investment to ensure it becomes your signature achievement. Natalie's face had gone pale. The Westbrook estate was the most prestigious restoration project in the state, a contract worth millions that would cement Vincent's company among the elite firms. To Vincent Mercer, Harold raised his glass. The future of craftsmanship in this family. Applause filled the room, some genuine, some confused, some clearly reluctant. Vincent accepted the envelope with a firm handshake. "Thank you, Harold. I won't disappoint you." As he returned to his seat, Natalie touched his arm. "I had no idea," she whispered, her earlier dismissal apparently forgotten. Vincent said nothing, merely nodded. Something had shifted today, though not in the way anyone in the room might suspect. In that moment of public validation and private humiliation, a seed had been planted in Vincent's mind, a seed that would grow into something far darker than anyone could imagine. Chapter 2. Fault Lines. The Davidson sapphires gleamed against Natalie's throat as she examined her reflection, tilting her head to catch the light. Vincent watched from the doorway of their bedroom, his thoughts circling around the events of the previous night. "Harold has never endorsed anyone like that before," Natalie said, eyes meeting his in the mirror. "You should feel honored." "Is that what I should feel?" Vincent asked, his voice neutral. She turned to face him, the necklace drawing his attention to the elegant line of her collarbone. "What does that mean?" "You handed me a serving tray, Natalie, in front of everyone." "Oh, don't be so sensitive." She waved dismissively. "It was nothing. You're not real family." He quoted her words back precisely. A flash of irritation crossed her face. "I was stressed. Dad was giving away family heirlooms. You know how important this transition is for everyone." "For the real family," Vincent said. Natalie sighed, approaching him with practiced contrition. "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings." She smoothed his collar. "But look at what came of it, the Westbrook contract. This changes everything for your business." Vincent noted her choice of words. "Your business, not our future." Another hairline fracture in the foundation of their marriage. "Yes," he agreed. "It changes everything." Later that morning, Vincent drove to the Westbrook estate, a magnificent 19th century mansion that had fallen into disrepair. The Historical Commission had been seeking the right firm to restore it to its former glory while modernizing its infrastructure. Standing on the sweeping grounds, Vincent felt a familiar satisfaction. This was where he belonged, assessing structural integrity, imagining possibilities, solving the puzzles of restoration. His phone vibrated with a text from Parker Sullivan, his project manager and closest friend. "Congratulations on Westbrook. Champagne tonight?" Vincent texted back, "Site visit now. Me at office at 3. As he pocketed his phone, another text arrived from an unknown number. "Your father-in-law's endorsement came with strings attached. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Gazebo, 1 p.m. if you want the truth." Vincent stared at the message, a cold certainty settling in his stomach. He'd never trusted Harold's sudden change of heart. At precisely 1 p.m., Vincent approached the gazebo overlooking the river. A woman in her early 40s sat on the bench, her posture rigid with tension. "Mr. Mercer?" she asked as he approached. "Yes, and you are?" "Diana Lowell, Chief Financial Officer at Davidson Enterprises." She gestured to the space beside her. "Please sit." Vincent remained standing. "What strings are attached to the Westbrook contract?" Diana glanced around before speaking. "Harold is dying. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less." The information landed like a physical blow. Despite their differences, Vincent had respected the older man. "I'm sorry to hear that," Vincent said. "But what does this have to do with me?" "Everything." Diana pulled out a tablet. "Harold's succession plan names you as interim CEO of Davidson Enterprises after his death." Vincent's surprise must have shown on his face. "Not what you expected?" Diana asked. "Not even close." "Why not Natalie or one of his nephews?" Diana's expression tightened. "Because Davidson Enterprises is in trouble. Serious trouble." She swiped through several documents on her tablet. "The company has been losing money for years. Harold's been covering it with personal funds and increasingly risky loans. When he dies, those loans come due. And he wants me to clean up his mess? He wants you to take the fall. Diana's eyes met his. Think about it. The outsider who suddenly gains control, then mismanages the company into bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the family assets will have been quietly transferred to a new holding company, one in which you have no stake. Vincent processed this, his expression revealing nothing. Why are you telling me this, Diana? Because I've worked for this company for 15 years. I've built my reputation on honest accounting, and I'm not going to prison for fraud. She handed him a flash drive. Everything's here. The shell companies, the diverted funds, the loan structures. Harold may be dying, but he's orchestrating one final con to protect the family fortune. And my wife? What's her role in this? Diana hesitated. Natalie has been on the board for 5 years, Mr. Mercer. She signs the quarterly reports. She knows. The pieces clicked into place. Natalie's increasing emotional distance, her sudden interest in company meetings, the late nights she claimed were spent with friends. There's more, Diana said quietly. About Natalie and Dominic Foster. Who's Dominic Foster? Harold's nephew, his sister's son. He joined the company 3 years ago as legal counsel. Diana couldn't meet his eyes. They've been close. Vincent felt something shift inside him. Not pain, but a cold, clarifying anger. How close? I've said enough. Diana stood. What you do with this information is your choice, Mr. Mercer. But be careful. The Davidsons protect their own. After Diana left, Vincent sat alone in the gazebo, turning the flash drive over in his hands. The foundation of his life, his marriage, his business relationships, his future plans, had just revealed its fatal flaws. Like any master builder, Vincent knew that when a foundation couldn't be repaired, the only option was to demolish and rebuild. His phone buzzed again. Natalie, dinner with Dad tonight. He wants to discuss the transition. Wear the blue suit. Vincent texted back a simple confirmation, his mind already mapping a different sort of transition, one that would leave nothing of his old life standing. Chapter 3. Hidden Chambers. The Anderson project had been Vincent's first major restoration, a Victorian-era home with hidden rooms and passageways that had tested his ingenuity. Now, sitting in his home office while Natalie prepared for their dinner with Harold, Vincent applied those same skills to unraveling the hidden structures of his marriage. Diana Lowell's flash drive had revealed a labyrinth of financial deceptions, accounts in the Cayman Islands, falsified profit reports, and systematic looting of the company's pension fund. But Vincent was more interested in the personal communications folder. Emails between Natalie and Dominic Foster dating back 2 years painted an intimate picture of betrayal. Hotel receipts, plans coordinated around Vincent's business trips, discussions of their future together once the situation was resolved. Vincent felt strangely calm as he read through their exchanges. The man he had been a week ago might have felt devastated. That man was gone now, replaced by someone colder and more calculating. His phone rang. Parker Sullivan. I've got the initial assessment for Westbrook, Parker said when Vincent answered. But there's something off about the contract terms. The payment schedule's unusual. In what way? Vincent asked, though he already suspected the answer. Major payments backloaded, with your company fronting most of the expenses. If anything goes wrong mid-project, you'd be exposed financially. As designed, Vincent murmured. What? Nothing. Listen, Parker, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. Of course. What's going on, Vince? I'll explain everything soon. But right now, I need you to transfer the Anderson documentation to a secure server. All of it, especially the technical specs for the security system. Silence on the line. Parker had helped design that system, a state-of-the-art setup that allowed the homeowner to monitor and control every aspect of the property remotely. Vince, that's proprietary client information. We can't just. It's for a similar installation, Vincent interrupted. I'll handle the permissions. Just give me those files. After ending the call, Vincent opened his personal safe and removed a small black notebook, his contingency plan journal. For years, he documented potential business threats and their countermeasures, a habit that had saved his company more than once. Now, he began a new entry. Threat: Davidson family conspiracy to destroy my company and reputation players. Harold, Natalie, Dominic Foster, unknown others timeline. Accelerated due to Harold's illness. Verify medical records, vulnerabilities, control of information, legal exposure, emotional manipulation assets, advanced knowledge, technical skills, liquid reserves and separate accounts, the Anderson system. Vincent closed the notebook as Natalie appeared in the doorway, stunning in a deep blue dress that complemented her eyes. "You're not dressed," she observed. "We need to leave in 20 minutes. "I'll be ready," Vincent assured her. "Just finalizing some notes on Westbrook." She smiled, coming to perch on his desk. "Dad's really excited about your involvement. He's been telling everyone how visionary you are." "That's quite a change from not real family," Vincent remarked. Natalie's smile faltered. "Are you still upset about that?" "I told you I was sorry." "No, not upset." Vincent stood and kissed her forehead. "Just adapting to my new position." "Well, adapt into your suit," she teased, patting his chest. "Tonight's important." Vincent watched her leave, then turned back to his computer to send one final email before dinner. Its recipient, Diana Lowell. Its content, a proposal she wouldn't be able to refuse. Dinner at Harold's penthouse unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated performance. Crystal gleamed, fine wine flowed, and Harold Davidson held court at the head of the table. Every inch the patriarch, despite the new gauntness in his face that Vincent now recognized as the mark of his illness. "The Westbrook restoration will be the crown jewel of your portfolio," Harold was saying, raising his glass to Vincent. "And just the beginning of our new partnership." "I'm honored by your confidence," Vincent replied, the appropriate amount of gratitude in his voice. "Family supports family," Harold declared. "Isn't that right, Natalie?" Vincent watched his wife nod enthusiastically, the Davidson sapphires catching the light at her throat. Beside her sat Dominic Foster, introduced as Harold's legal advisor for the evening. Foster was younger than Vincent had expected, perhaps 35, with the polished good looks of old money and a Harvard law degree. "The succession plan is quite elegant," Foster said, smiling at Vincent with perfect teeth. "Harold has thought of everything." "I'm sure he has," Vincent agreed, returning the smile while noting how Dominic's hand briefly touched Natalie's beneath the table. As dinner progressed, Vincent played his role flawlessly, the grateful son-in-law being welcomed into the inner circle at last. He asked the right questions about the company structure, expressed appropriate concern about Harold's health, and deferred to the family's greater experience in corporate matters. "You'll have full operational control," Harold explained, with the family board providing strategic guidance. "And a convenient scapegoat when it all collapses," Vincent thought, but said, "I appreciate your trust, Harold. I won't let you down." "I know you won't, son." Harold's eyes, sharp despite his illness, held Vincent's. "You're a builder. You understand that sometimes you have to tear something down to make it stronger." The double meaning hung in the air between them, a challenge issued and accepted in the same breath. Later, as they prepared to leave, Harold took Vincent aside in his study. "There's one more thing." He withdrew a small wooden box from his desk. "This is for you, a symbol of my trust." Vincent opened the box to find an antique pocket watch, its case engraved with the Davidson family crest. "This belonged to my grandfather," Harold said, "the first Davidson builder." "I can't accept this," Vincent said, understanding exactly what this gesture meant. Not inclusion, but evidence. A gift to the son-in-law just before the company's collapse would suggest Vincent had been welcomed and trusted completely. "I insist." Harold pressed the box into Vincent's hands. "Your family now." Vincent closed his fingers around the box, thinking of the other gift Harold had planned for him: financial ruin and public disgrace. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly. "I'll treasure it." On the drive home, Natalie chatted excitedly about their new future, while Vincent listened in silence. When they arrived home, he declined her suggestion of a nightcap, claiming fatigue. In their bedroom, Vincent watched as Natalie carefully removed the sapphire necklace, placing it in its velvet-lined box with reverent hands. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she said, catching his reflection in her mirror. Yes, Vincent agreed, thinking not of the jewels, but of what was to come. Some things are too precious to lose. Later, while Natalie slept, Vincent stood at their bedroom window, Harold's pocket watch in his palm. Every building had its weak points, the places where pressure, properly applied, would cause the entire structure to fail. The Davidson family empire was no different. Vincent opened the watch, unsurprised to find a hidden compartment behind the timepiece. Inside was a small key, old but well-maintained. Another piece of the puzzle, another hidden chamber waiting to be explored. The builder in Vincent appreciated the craftsmanship of Harold's plan. The husband in him mourned what had been lost. But the man he was becoming, that man began to construct something new from the ruins of his trust. A design not of restoration, but of calculated retribution. Chapter 4. Excavation. You've been quiet all week, Natalie observed over breakfast, 3 days after their dinner with Harold. Is something wrong with the Westbrook project? Vincent looked up from his tablet, where he'd been reviewing the information Diana Lowell had been sending him. Detailed accounts of Davidson Enterprises' financial manipulations. Just focused, he replied, offering a reassuring smile. A project this size requires complete attention. Well, don't forget we have the charity gala tomorrow night, Natalie reminded him. The whole family will be there, plus half the city's business leaders. Dad wants to introduce you as the future of Davidson Enterprises. Vincent nodded. The future of Davidson Enterprises. I wouldn't miss it. After Natalie left for her Pilates class, though Vincent now knew she was meeting Dominic Foster at the Lakeside Hotel, he drove to the offices of Mercer Restoration. The company he'd built from nothing occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse downtown. Its exposed brick walls and reclaimed timber beams a testament to his philosophy of honoring the past while building for the future. Parker Sullivan was waiting in Vincent's office, concern etched on his features. At 45, Parker had been with Vincent since the beginning, a structural engineer whose brilliance was matched only by his loyalty. I've secured those Anderson files you asked for, Parker said without preamble. Now will you tell me what's going on? You've been different since the retirement party. Vincent closed his office door. What I'm about to tell you involves serious legal risks. If you want to walk away after hearing it, I'll understand. Parker's expression hardened. 10 years, Vince. Have I ever walked away? For the next hour, Vincent laid out everything. Harold's terminal illness, the company's impending collapse, Natalie's affair with Dominic, and the plan to make Vincent the fall guy for decades of corporate malfeasance. Parker listened in stunned silence, then let out a low whistle. Jesus, Vince. What are you going to do? Not what they expect, Vincent replied, unlocking a drawer in his desk and removing his contingency journal. I'm going to expose the fraud, but not as their scapegoat, as the person who discovered and reported it. But if you do that, Davidson Enterprises will collapse, yes, and the family will lose everything. Vincent's voice remained calm, detached, including their control over my future. And Natalie? Vincent's expression didn't change. My wife made her choice when she decided to betray me, both personally and professionally. This isn't like you, Vince, Parker said quietly. You've always been the guy who fixes things, not the one who tears them down. Sometimes Vincent quoted Harold's words back to him, you have to tear something down to make it stronger. He opened his journal to a fresh page and began writing. I need your help with 4 things. First, quietly transfer our most valuable contracts to our subsidiary company. Second, prepare legal documentation showing that I discovered financial irregularities at Davidson Enterprises during my preliminary review. That's getting into dangerous territory, Parker warned. Third, Vincent continued as if he hadn't heard. I need the Anderson security system reconfigured for a new installation. And fourth, I need it done by tomorrow night. Parker stared at him. The gala? What are you planning? Vincent closed his journal. Justice, Parker. Nothing more or less than what they deserve. That afternoon, Vincent visited the Westbrook estate again, this time with a different purpose. While the historical commissioner guided him through the property, pointing out architectural features that needed preservation, Vincent was cataloging hiding places, sight lines, and potential security vulnerabilities. The original owner was quite paranoid, the commissioner explained as they entered a wood-paneled study. This room contains 3 hidden compartments that we know of. Vincent examined the intricate woodwork, identifying the subtle pressure points that would reveal the hidden spaces. Fascinating craftsmanship. We've been hesitant to modernize this room too much, the commissioner continued. The historical integrity will be maintained completely, Vincent assured him. In fact, I'd like to preserve these security features as a demonstration of period technology. Later, alone in the study, Vincent examined the antique key from Harold's pocket watch. The craftsmanship matched the era of the house. Not a coincidence, he was certain. After trying several of the hidden compartments, the key finally fit into an almost invisible keyhole behind a bookshelf. The compartment contained a single document, a deed to the Westbrook estate itself, dated 1892, bearing the name Davidson. Of course, Vincent murmured, photographing the document. It wasn't just any house. Harold wasn't merely offering Vincent a prestigious restoration contract. He was asking him to restore the original Davidson family home, lost generations ago and now reacquired. The symbolism would have been poetic if it weren't so manipulative. That evening, Vincent received a text from Diana Lowell. Foster moved up the timeline. Transfer papers being prepared for your signature after the gala announcement. Full dossier on his activities in your secure email. Vincent thanked her, then opened the encrypted email on a dedicated laptop. The dossier revealed that Dominic Foster had orchestrated similar schemes at 2 previous companies, joining as trusted legal counsel, identifying a potential scapegoat, then managing the controlled implosion while protecting key assets. A pattern, then, not personal malice against Vincent specifically, but a calculated strategy that had worked before. The knowledge should have been comforting, but instead, it hardened Vincent's resolve. He would not be another name on Foster's list of victims. He sent a brief response to Diana, tomorrow night. Be ready. When Natalie returned home that evening, flushed and apologetic about her extended lunch with friends, Vincent greeted her with a tender kiss. I've been thinking, he said, stroking her hair. You were right. I've been distant this week. Relief flooded her features. You have been. I was worried. The pressure of the Westbrook project, your father's announcement tomorrow, it's a lot to process. He took her hands in his. But I'm grateful, Natalie, for everything. Guilt flickered briefly in her eyes. What brought this on? Perspective, Vincent said simply. Tomorrow night is a new beginning for us. I want us to enter it with nothing but honesty between us. Honesty, she repeated, not meeting his gaze. Is there anything you want to tell me? Vincent asked gently. Anything at all? For a moment, it seemed she might confess. Her lips parted, her breathing quickened. Then she shook her head. No, nothing. Vincent nodded, accepting her choice. Then let's enjoy tonight. I've made reservations at Antonio's, your favorite. Over dinner, Vincent was the attentive husband they both pretended he had always been. He asked about her day, complimented her dress, and shared amusing anecdotes from the Westbrook site visit. Not once did he hint at his knowledge of her betrayal or his plans for retribution. It was only as they were leaving the restaurant that Vincent paused, as if struck by a sudden thought. I almost forgot, he said, reaching into his pocket. A gift for tomorrow's announcement. He presented her with a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings. Not Davidson heirlooms, but new pieces he'd had commissioned to match her necklace. Vincent, they're beautiful. Natalie breathed, genuinely touched. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he interrupted, kissing her cheek. They're designed to complement the Davidson sapphires. Family supporting family, right? Her smile faltered for just an instant before she recovered. Right. Family. That night, lying beside his sleeping wife, Vincent finalized the details of his plan. Every contingency accounted for, every reaction anticipated. By this time tomorrow, the Davidson family legacy would be irrevocably altered, excavated to its rotten foundation and exposed for all to see. Vincent closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the blueprint of his vengeance, a design more precise and unforgiving than any building he had ever created. Chapter 5. Load-Bearing Walls. The charity gala transformed the Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom into a glittering showcase of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over silk gowns and bespoke suits, while a string quartet played unobtrusively in the corner. The air hummed with power, privilege, and the underlying current of ambition that fueled such gatherings. Vincent adjusted his bow tie, surveying the scene with clinical detachment. Every person in this room played a role in his design, some knowingly, most as unwitting structural elements supporting the weight of what was to come. "You look devastatingly handsome," Natalie whispered, appearing at his side in a midnight blue gown that showcased the Davidson sapphires at her throat and ears. "Every woman here is wondering how I got so lucky." Vincent smiled, placing his hand at the small of her back. "The luckiest man in the room, that's me." Across the ballroom, he caught sight of Dominic Foster in conversation with Harold. The younger man's attention, however, kept straying to Natalie, brief, hungry glances that confirmed everything Vincent needed to know. "Your father seems energetic tonight," Vincent observed. "No one would guess he's unwell." Natalie tensed slightly beside him. "What do you mean?" "Diana mentioned his health concerns," Vincent said casually. "I assumed you knew." "Diana Lowell spoke to you?" "About Dad." The alarm in Natalie's voice was genuine. In passing, Vincent assured her. Something about making sure the transition goes smoothly, given his treatments. Before Natalie could respond, Harold himself approached, his public persona firmly in place despite the pallor beneath his tan. "There's my visionary son-in-law," Harold boomed, clapping Vincent on the shoulder. "Ready for your grand introduction?" "Born ready," Vincent replied with an easy confidence that made Harold nod approvingly. "That's the spirit." Harold turned to his daughter. "Natalie, the McAllisters are asking for you. Something about the Children's Hospital fundraiser." As Natalie moved away, Harold's demeanor shifted subtly, his voice lowering. "Foster tells me you've been asking questions about the company structure, studying the financial reports." "Due diligence," Vincent explained. "If I'm to step into your shoes, I need to understand exactly what I'm walking into." Harold studied him carefully. "And what do you think you're walking into, Vincent?" "A complex situation that requires a steady hand." Vincent met his father-in-law's gaze without flinching. "Fortunately, I'm good with complicated structures." A flash of something, respect, perhaps, or wariness, crossed Harold's face. "Indeed you are. That's why I chose you." He checked his watch. 20 minutes until the announcement. "I suggest you use that time to circulate. Make connections. These people will be instrumental to your success. Or witnesses to my destruction," Vincent thought, but didn't say. As Harold walked away, Vincent felt his phone vibrate with a text from Parker. "Systems activated. Monitors accessible on your secure tablet. Diana, in position." Vincent acknowledged with a single letter, K, then made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with the city's business leaders, politicians, and socialites. Each conversation was brief but purposeful, laying groundwork for what would follow. At the bar, he encountered Dominic Foster ordering champagne. 2 glasses, Foster specified, before noticing Vincent. "Ah, the man of the hour." "Excited about the announcement?" "Anticipating it," Vincent replied, accepting a whiskey from the bartender. "Though I admit, I'm still learning the intricacies of Davidson Enterprises." Foster smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "It's a complex organization. Fortunately, you'll have the family board to guide you through the challenging parts. I've always found that the best way to understand a structure is to examine its foundation," Vincent said, raising his glass in a toast. "What lies beneath tells you everything about stability." Foster's smile faltered slightly. "Sometimes what lies beneath is best left undisturbed." Mercer. "Perhaps," Vincent conceded. "But I've built my career on knowing exactly where to look for hidden weaknesses." The 2 men regarded each other with newfound clarity, opponents recognizing the opening moves of a chess match already in progress. "Enjoy your moment in the spotlight," Foster said finally, taking both champagne glasses. "I've prepared quite an introduction for you." As Foster walked away, Vincent checked his secure tablet. The surveillance system he had installed, modeled after the Anderson design, but significantly enhanced, was functioning perfectly. Split-screen displays showed Harold's private office at the hotel, where Foster had just entered, setting down the champagne glasses and removing a folder from his briefcase. Another screen showed Natalie in conversation with the mayor's wife, her body language relaxed but her eyes constantly scanning the room. A third display monitored Diana Lowell, positioned near the service entrance with a slim portfolio case. Vincent put away the tablet as the string quartet fell silent, replaced by the gentle chiming of a spoon against crystal. Harold calling for attention. "Friends, colleagues, distinguished guests," Harold began, standing at the center of the ballroom with commanding presence. "Tonight is more than a charity gala. It's a celebration of legacy and future." The crowd turned toward him, conversations fading to attentive silence. "For 40 years, I've had the privilege of building Davidson Enterprises from a small construction firm into the company you know today." Harold's voice carried emotion that, Vincent noted, seemed entirely genuine. "Now, as I prepare for the next chapter of my life, I want to introduce you to the man who will lead our family legacy forward." Natalie appeared at Vincent's side, squeezing his hand with what felt like genuine pride. "This is it," she whispered. "Vincent Mercer," Harold continued, gesturing toward him, "has demonstrated extraordinary vision, integrity, and skill in his own right. Though he came into our family as my daughter's husband, tonight I am proud to welcome him as my successor." Applause filled the room. Vincent moved forward, the perfect picture of humility and gratitude as he joined Harold at the center of the gathering. "Thank you, Harold," Vincent said, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "And thank you all for your warm welcome. The Davidson legacy is one of excellence and innovation, values I've always strived to embody in my own work." He paused, scanning the rapt faces before him. "When Harold first approached me about this transition, I was honored but cautious. Taking the helm of such a prestigious company is no small responsibility." Harold nodded approvingly beside him. "So I did what any builder would do," Vincent continued. "I examined the foundation." A subtle shift in the room's energy, Harold's posture stiffening, Dominic Foster setting down his champagne glass. "What I discovered," Vincent said, his tone shifting from warm to clinical, "was a structure in danger of catastrophic failure." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Harold stepped closer, laying a warning hand on Vincent's arm, which Vincent smoothly evaded. "Davidson Enterprises," Vincent announced clearly, "has been systematically defrauded for the past 7 years. Pension funds diverted, profits hidden in offshore accounts, loans secured against falsified assets." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Harold's face drained of color. "Vincent," he hissed, "what are you doing?" "Exactly what you trained me to do," Vincent replied quietly. "Tearing down to rebuild." Before Harold could respond, Vincent raised his voice again. "As evidence of these assertions, I provided the SEC with comprehensive documentation." He nodded toward the rear of the ballroom, where federal agents were already entering through the main doors. Simultaneously, Diana Lowell stepped forward from her position near the service entrance, catching the attention of the nearest reporter. "As Chief Financial Officer of Davidson Enterprises," she said clearly, "I can confirm Mr. Mercer's allegations and provide supporting documentation." Chaos erupted. Guests backed away from Harold and Vincent, creating a visible divide in the crowd. Natalie pushed through to her father's side, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. "You can't do this," she whispered furiously to Vincent. "This is my family." "Interesting definition of family," Vincent replied, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Does it include your lover, Dominic? Or just the people whose money you were planning to protect while I took the fall for your father's crimes?" Natalie's face went white. "You know, everything," Vincent confirmed. "Every email, every hotel receipt, every conference call planning my professional execution." Harold swayed slightly, his illness suddenly visible beneath his crumbling composure. "This won't stand," he said hoarsely. "We'll deny everything. It's your word against decades of documented evidence." Vincent interrupted, as federal agents approached their position, including the files in Foster's briefcase upstairs, the ones outlining how ownership of company assets would transfer to shell corporations after my appointment. Dominic Foster began moving toward the exit, only to find his path blocked by two agents. "Mr. Foster," one said formally, "we'd like to speak with you about your involvement in similar situations at Westridge Capital and Pinnacle Industries." As Foster was escorted away, Vincent turned back to Harold and Natalie, his expression devoid of emotion. "The structural failure was inevitable," he told them quietly. "I simply controlled the demolition." An agent approached, addressing Harold. "Mr. Davidson, we need you to come with us for questioning." Harold's eyes never left Vincent's face. "You've destroyed everything I built." "No," Vincent corrected him. "You did that yourself. I'm just the one who refused to be buried in the rubble." As Harold was led away, Natalie grabbed Vincent's arm. "What about me?" she demanded, tears streaking her perfect makeup. "What happens to me in this plan of yours?" Vincent gently removed her hand from his sleeve. "That depends on the choices you make next," he said. "Unlike your father and Dominic, you have options." "What options?" she asked bitterly. "You've taken everything." Vincent leaned close, his voice for her ears alone. "Option 1. Cooperate with the investigation, return the money you've hidden in your private account, and walk away with your freedom and a clean slate." Her eyes widened in shock that he knew about her secret funds. "Option 2, he continued. Claim ignorance and loyalty to your father and Foster. Fight the charges. Lose everything anyway, including your liberty." "You're asking me to betray my family," she whispered. "I'm offering you the chance to save yourself," Vincent corrected. "More than you offered me." The Davidson sapphires gleamed at her throat, a family legacy now tarnished beyond repair. She reached up, unfastening the necklace with trembling fingers. "You should take these," she said, holding them out to him. "They're probably worth something." Vincent didn't take them. "Keep them, Natalie. A reminder of choices and consequences." As reporters swarmed and cameras flashed, Vincent walked away from his wife, his gaze already fixed on the future rising from the ruins he had engineered. Chapter 6. Pressure Points. 3 weeks after the gala, Vincent sat in the conference room of Mercer Restoration, reviewing final plans for the Westbrook estate. The scandal had dominated headlines for days, but Vincent had remained largely above the fray, portrayed by the media as the whistleblower who had discovered financial irregularities during his preliminary review of Davidson Enterprises. Parker Sullivan entered, closing the door behind him. "The bankruptcy court approved the sale of Davidson's remaining legitimate assets," he reported. "Our bid for the construction division was accepted." Vincent nodded, making a note on his tablet. "And the estate? The Historical Commission wants to proceed with the restoration under our original contract. They were impressed by your integrity in the Davidson matter." Outside the windows, autumn sunlight glinted off the river. Vincent had always appreciated this view. The water's constant movement, its ability to shape even the hardest stone through persistent pressure. "Any word from Natalie's attorneys?" Vincent asked. Parker hesitated. "She's accepted your settlement offer. Full divorce, no claims on your business assets, in exchange for the penthouse and a reasonable monthly allowance." "Good." Vincent's tone was neutral, businesslike. "And the other matter? Diana Lowell has been offered immunity in exchange for her testimony. She asked me to thank you for keeping your word." Vincent allowed himself a small smile. She earned it. Without her documentation, none of this would have been possible. Parker pulled up a chair, his expression serious. "Foster is still fighting the charges. His attorneys are claiming entrapment, saying you set him up at the gala." "Let him fight," Vincent said dismissively. "The evidence speaks for itself." "And Harold," Vincent's expression hardened. "Terminal cancer doesn't preclude serving time, even if it's in a medical facility." Parker studied his friend. In the weeks since the gala, Vincent had transformed, not outwardly, but in subtle ways that only someone who knew him well would notice. The warmth that had once tempered his precision had been replaced by something colder, more absolute. "You never told me how you knew," Parker said finally. "About the pocket watch, the key, the connection to Westbrook Estate." How'd you put it all together? Vincent leaned back in his chair. Harold made a fundamental mistake. He saw me as a convenient tool, the craftsman who could restore his ancestral home while taking the fall for his financial crimes. But he forgot that builders understand systems better than anyone. He picked up a blueprint of the Westbrook estate, tracing his finger along the intricate design. Every structure has its pressure points, the places where, if properly stressed, the entire system fails. Harold Davidson was no different. Parker nodded slowly. And Natalie, do you ever think about reconciliation? No. The word held absolute finality. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. The intercom buzzed, interrupting their conversation. Vincent's assistant announced the arrival of a visitor, Helena Reeves, Harold Davidson's sister and Dominic Foster's mother. Vincent exchanged a surprised glance with Parker before instructing his assistant to send her in. Helena Reeves entered the conference room with the confident stride of someone accustomed to power. At 65, she remained striking. Silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, posture military straight, eyes sharp with intelligence and purpose. "Mr. Mercer," she said, declining Vincent's gesture toward chair. "I'll be brief. You've dismantled my brother's company, destroyed my son's legal career, and humiliated our family name." "Your family did that themselves, Mrs. Reeves," Vincent replied calmly. "I merely exposed the truth." Her eyes flashed with anger. "The truth? Let me tell you about truth, Mr. Mercer. Davidson Enterprises supported hundreds of families, funded community projects, built half the infrastructure in this city. Now those employees are jobless, those projects abandoned. The construction division will continue under new management," Vincent noted. "Those jobs are safe." "How convenient for you," Helena sneered. "The builder acquires his rival's assets at bankruptcy prices while positioning himself as a hero." Vincent regarded her steadily. "Did you come here to accuse me of something specific, Mrs. Reeves, or simply to vent your displeasure?" "I came to warn you," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You've made powerful enemies. My family has connections you can't imagine. People who owe us favors, people who understand loyalty." "Interesting," Vincent observed. "Your definition of loyalty seems to include fraud, conspiracy, and infidelity. I wonder if these powerful connections share your flexible ethics." Helena stepped closer, her composure slipping. "My nephew-in-law was supposed to be the fall guy in a necessary business restructuring. Instead, you become the architect of our destruction. There will be consequences." Vincent rose slowly, towering over her despite her commanding presence. "Let me be perfectly clear, Mrs. Reeves. I've documented every aspect of your family's criminal activities, including your own role as a silent board member who approved diverted pension funds. Those documents are secured with instructions for their release should anything happen to me or my company." Fear flickered briefly in her eyes before being masked by defiance. "You think you've won," she said. "You haven't. This isn't over." "On that point," Vincent agreed, "we understand each other perfectly." After Helena stormed out, Parker whistled low. "That was intense. Think she's serious about retaliation?" "Absolutely," Vincent confirmed, "which is why we're implementing Phase 2 immediately." "Phase 2? Parker looked confused. "I thought the Davidson matter was concluded." Vincent turned to his computer, pulling up a secure file. Harold, Natalie, and Foster were just the beginning. The entire Davidson network needs to be restructured. On the screen appeared a complex organizational chart, a web of connections linking the Davidson family to various businesses, political figures, and social institutions throughout the city. "Jesus, Vince," Parker muttered. "How long have you been working on this?" "Since the night of the retirement party," Vincent said, his voice distant with memory. "When I recognized what they intended for me, I began mapping everyone involved in their ecosystem, beneficiaries, enablers, silent partners." "And what exactly do you plan to do with this information?" Vincent's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held cold determination. "Apply pressure to the right points until the entire structure collapses, just as they would have done to me." Parker looked troubled. "This is starting to sound less like justice and more like retribution," Vincent finished for him. Yes, perhaps it is. Later that evening, Vincent sat alone in his new apartment overlooking the city. The space was minimalist, functional, a deliberate contrast to the lavish penthouse he had shared with Natalie. Here, every element served a purpose, without ornamentation or sentimentality. His phone chimed with a text from an unfamiliar number. They're planning something. Meeting tonight at the Winslow Club. Foster, Helena, and 3 others. Details in your secure email. DL. Vincent sent a brief acknowledgement, then opened his laptop to check the encrypted message from Diana Lowell. Her position as the state's key witness against the Davidsons had not diminished her value as Vincent's inside source. If anything, her visibility now protected her from retaliation while giving her access to information others might conceal. The email contained meeting details, security arrangements, and a list of attendees, including 2 names that surprised even Vincent. Powerful connections indeed. He opened his contingency journal, adding these new players to his organizational chart. Every person who had benefited from Davidson corruption, every individual who had looked the other way, every enabler who might now seek vengeance on behalf of the family, all mapped with precision. Vincent had once specialized in preserving historical structures while modernizing their functionality. Now he applied those same skills to a different kind of renovation, the systematic dismantling of a corrupt network that had nearly destroyed him. One by one, he identified the pressure points within this larger system. The weak connections, the vulnerable dependencies, the load-bearing relationships that, if removed, would bring down entire sections of the Davidson influence. As midnight approached, Vincent activated a secure connection to the surveillance system he had installed at the Winslow Club months earlier. Not in anticipation of this specific meeting, but as part of his broader strategy of information gathering. The exclusive club's private dining room came into view on his screen. Helena Reeves sat at the head of the table, flanked by attorneys representing both Harold and Foster. 2 city council members, both recipients of generous Davidson contributions, completed the gathering. Vincent increased the audio, listening as Helena outlined their strategy for countering the Mercer problem. He's vulnerable through his company, she was saying. The Westbrook contract is his financial lifeline now. If that were to encounter difficulties, one of the council members nodded. The Historical Commission serves at the pleasure of the council. We could raise concerns about his suitability given the ongoing legal complications. Not enough, Foster interjected, his normally polished demeanor showing signs of strain. He's destroyed everything we built. He deserves more than a business setback. Helena placed a restraining hand on her son's arm. Patience, Dominic. Vincent Mercer has made himself a target, but we must be strategic. Reckless action will only strengthen his position. What about his personal life? One of the attorneys suggested. Now that Natalie's out of the picture, is there anyone else close to him? Family? A girlfriend? Business partners? Vincent tensed as Foster mentioned Parker Sullivan's name. His project manager. They've been friends for years. That could be a pressure point. Look into it, Helena instructed. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Find Mercer's. Vincent closed the connection, his decision made. Phase 2 would accelerate immediately. The Davidsons had survived on intimidation and leverage for generations. Now those same tactics would be turned against them with methodical precision. He picked up his phone and drafted a message to Diana. Time to implement the Westbrook Protocol. All targets. No exceptions. Her response came almost immediately. Understood. Files ready for distribution. Point of no return, Vincent. Are you certain? Vincent thought of Natalie's words at the retirement party. You're not real family. He thought of the serving tray in his hands, the weight of a decade's humiliation. He thought of Harold's calculated plan to build him up only to destroy him. He thought of Foster and Natalie planning their future together while orchestrating his downfall. His reply was simple. Proceed. Chapter 7. Controlled Collapse. 6 months after the gala, Vincent stood in the newly restored grand ballroom of the Westbrook estate. Sunlight streamed through the meticulously refurbished stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across marble floors that had been hidden beneath decades of neglect. The restoration was nearly complete. a triumph of craftsmanship that had already earned national recognition in architectural circles. The Historical Commission is ecstatic, Parker said, joining him by the central fireplace. They're talking about special recognition at next month's Preservation Awards. Vincent nodded, studying the intricate woodwork his team had painstakingly recreated from fragmented remains and faded photographs. The Davidson craftsmanship deserved to be preserved, whatever the family's later sins. Parker glanced at him carefully. Speaking of the Davidsons, have you heard the latest? About Harold's compassionate release? Yes. Vincent's expression remained neutral. Terminal illness has its privileges, even in the justice system. Not just that, Parker said, lowering his voice despite the empty room. Helena Reeves was indicted this morning. Tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy. The whole package. A faint smile touched Vincent's lips. Interesting timing. Interesting source material, Parker corrected. The evidence package came from anonymous digital drops, exactly like the ones that brought down City Councilman Weber last month, and Judge Harrington the month before that. Vincent said nothing, moving to examine a section of repaired ceiling medallion. Vince, Parker pressed this systematic dismantling of everyone connected to the Davidsons. It has your fingerprints all over it. Not literally, of course. You're too careful for that. But the precision, the timing, the selection of targets. The preservation of historical detail is always my priority, Vincent remarked, apparently focused on the craftsmanship above. Don't you find it satisfying when long-buried truths finally see the light? Parker sighed. When does it end? Vincent turned to face his friend, his expression suddenly intense. When every person who participated in their scheme has faced consequences proportionate to their involvement. Not before. And Natalie? Parker asked quietly. Where does she fall in this spectrum of justice? Before Vincent could answer, his phone chimed with a notification. He checked the screen, then pocketed the device with a slight smile. Speaking of Natalie, she's just filed for bankruptcy. Apparently, the lifestyle she maintained after our divorce exceeded her settlement allowance. Parker looked troubled. You're monitoring her finances? I monitor everyone who might pose a threat, Vincent said matter-of-factly. The Davidsons still have resources and connections. Parker, vigilance is necessary. A construction worker appeared in the doorway, hesitantly interrupting their conversation. Mr. Mercer? We've uncovered something unusual behind the library wall. You might want to take a look. Does something unusual prove to be a hidden vault? Not marked on any of the historical plans, its existence apparently forgotten until the restoration work had revealed its outline behind damaged wood paneling. Vincent dismissed the workers, examining the vault door with professional interest. The mechanism was sophisticated for its era, a combination lock rather than a keyed entry. Think it's empty? Parker asked, running his hand over the aged metal surface. No, Vincent replied with curious certainty. The Davidsons never left value behind. He placed his ear against the door, fingers working the dial with practiced precision. Years of restoration work had given him an intuitive understanding of period mechanisms. After several methodical attempts, he felt the satisfying click of tumblers aligning. The heavy door swung open, revealing a space approximately 6 feet square. Metal shelving lined 3 walls, mostly empty but for a few leather-bound ledgers and a single wooden box similar to the one that had held the Davidson sapphires. Vincent approached the box first, opening it carefully. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a signet ring bearing the Davidson family crest, the same symbol engraved on Harold's pocket watch. Family artifacts, Vincent murmured, lifting the ring for closer inspection. Parker picked up one of the ledgers, flipping through yellowed pages covered in faded handwriting. These look like the original account from when the house was built, he observed. Construction costs, materials, worker payments. Vincent set down the ring and took the ledger from Parker, scanning the entries with growing interest. Not just construction records, he said after a moment. Look at these notations in the margins. The marginalia, written in a different hand from the main entries, detailed additional arrangements with city officials, property acquisitions from reluctant sellers, and competitive advantages gained through means left deliberately vague. The Davidson Empire's true foundation, Vincent said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice, built on corruption from the very beginning. He gathered the ledgers, along with the ring box. These will be useful. For the historical record? Parker asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Vincent's smile was cold. History should be accurate, don't you think? Especially family history. Later that day, Vincent sat in his office reviewing the newly discovered documents. The ledgers provided context for what he had already suspected. The Davidson legacy had been built on corruption, intimidation, and fraud from its inception. The current generation had merely continued a family tradition. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mercer, there's a Ms. Davidson here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Vincent paused, surprised. "Natalie?" "No, sir. She says her name is Claire Davidson, Harold Davidson's granddaughter from his first marriage." Vincent frowned. He had researched the Davidson family extensively and had found no record of Harold having children from any marriage before his union with Natalie's mother. "Send her in," he instructed, quickly activating recording protocols on his office security system. Claire Davidson entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. In her early 30s, she bore a striking resemblance to Harold, the same piercing eyes and authoritative presence, though her auburn hair and more delicate features suggested her mother's genetics had tempered the Davidson characteristics. "Mr. Mercer," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." Vincent shook her hand, gesturing toward a chair. "I wasn't aware Harold had a granddaughter." "Few people are," Claire replied, sitting with perfect posture. "My mother, Harold's daughter from his first marriage, was effectively erased from the family narrative after she refused to participate in certain business practices." Vincent studied her with cautious interest. "Why come to me now?" "Because you've done what no one else could or would," Claire said directly. "You've exposed the corruption that has sustained my grandfather's empire for generations." "Your timing is convenient," Vincent observed. "The Davidson family assets are being liquidated. Harold is dying under house arrest. And suddenly an unknown heir appears." Claire smiled, a gesture that transformed her features from merely attractive to genuinely striking. "I'm not here for assets, Mr. Mercer. I have my own resources. I'm here because we share a common interest." "Which is?" "Justice," she said simply. "My mother spent years gathering evidence of Davidson crimes, evidence she intended to bring to authorities before her convenient accident 12 years ago." Vincent leaned forward slightly. "What kind of accident?" "A car with failed brakes on a mountain road," Claire said, her composure slipping to reveal a flash of old pain. "The investigation found no evidence of tampering, despite clear signs of brake line damage." "I'm sorry for your loss," Vincent said, with genuine sympathy. "But that doesn't explain why you've come to me rather than the authorities investigating the current cases." Claire reached into her handbag, removing a flash drive which she placed on Vincent's desk. "Because what's on this drive doesn't just implicate my grandfather or his immediate circle. It exposes decades of systematic corruption involving judges, politicians, business leaders, many still in positions of power." Vincent made no move to touch the drive. "And you think I'm what?" "Your ally in this broader crusade. I think you understand something fundamental about the Davidsons that law enforcement doesn't," Claire said. "This isn't about a few illegal financial transactions. It's about a dynasty built on manipulation and fear. Taking down Harold, Foster, and Helena is merely pruning the branches. The roots remain intact." Vincent felt a curious resonance with her words, an echo of his own conclusions after discovering the Westbrook ledgers. "These roots you mention, how deep do they go?" "To the founding of this city," Claire answered without hesitation. "The original Davidson, the one who built Westbrook Estate, was a master of leveraging secrets and exploiting weaknesses. Every generation since has refined his methods." She gestured toward the flash drive. "Everything is there. Names, dates, transactions, evidence trails. My mother spent 20 years compiling it. At considerable risk, apparently," Vincent noted. Claire's expression hardened, a risk that ultimately cost her life. I've spent the last decade adding to her work, waiting for the right moment and the right ally to bring it forward. Vincent still didn't touch the drive. Why me, Ms. Davidson? Why not take this directly to federal prosecutors? Because 3 federal prosecutors are implicated in these files, she replied calmly. Because you've already demonstrated both the courage to confront my family and the strategic mind to do it effectively. And because you, unlike law enforcement, aren't constrained by bureaucracy or political considerations. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Claire Davidson represented either an invaluable ally or an elaborate trap, potentially both. What exactly are you proposing? He asked finally. A partnership, Claire answered. My information, your strategy. Together, we can dismantle not just the Davidson empire, but the entire corrupt network it's part of. Vincent considered her offer in silence. The systematic dismantling he had been orchestrating was already more extensive than anyone outside his inner circle realized. Claire's resources could accelerate the process significantly if she was genuine. I'll need to verify your information, he said at last, picking up the flash drive. And your identity. Claire nodded, seemingly unsurprised. I expected nothing less. You'll find DNA test results on the drive, confirming my relationship to Harold. As for the rest, she smiled again, that transformative expression that momentarily softened her intensity. I think you'll find the evidence speaks for itself. After she left, Vincent inserted the flash drive into a secure, isolated computer system specifically designed for evaluating potentially compromised data. The contents were even more extensive than Claire had suggested. Thousands of documents, photographs, audio recordings, and financial records dating back nearly 50 years. He spent hours scanning the material, his perception of the Davidson conspiracy expanding with each file. What he had uncovered was significant, but merely the visible portion of a far larger structure of corruption and influence. A text from Parker interrupted his review. Just got word. Dominic Foster has accepted a plea deal. Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against former clients. Names are sealed, but sources say they include major political figures. Vincent sent a brief acknowledgement, then returned to Claire's files with renewed focus. Foster's plea deal aligned perfectly with patterns emerging from the historical evidence. The Davidsons had always maintained escape routes, always preserved leverage against allies who might become liabilities. By midnight, Vincent had reached a decision. He composed 2 messages. The first to Diana Lowell. Need comprehensive background check on Claire Davidson, claiming to be Harold's granddaughter from first marriage. Priority Alpha. The second to Claire herself. Preliminary review complete. Meet tomorrow, 10 a.m., Westbrook Estate Library. Come alone. Her response was immediate. I'll be there. And Mr. Mercer? Thank you for your consideration. Vincent closed the secure system and walked to the windows of his office. The city spread before him, lights gleaming against the night sky like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere in that glittering landscape, Harold Davidson was spending his final days under house arrest, his empire crumbling around him. Vincent remembered the retirement party that had set everything in motion. The tray in his hands, Natalie's casual cruelty, the weight of years of subtle humiliations. Then Harold's surprising endorsement, the contract that was meant to be both bait and trap. You're not real family, Natalie had said. She had been right, though not in the way she intended. Vincent was not a Davidson by blood or marriage, a fact for which he was increasingly grateful as the true nature of the family legacy came into focus. Tomorrow's meeting with Claire would either cement a powerful alliance or reveal a sophisticated countermove in the ongoing chess match with what remained of the Davidson influence. Either way, Vincent would be prepared. The demolition he had begun with surgical precision was approaching its final phases. What would rise from the cleared ground remained to be seen. Chapter 8. Foundation Stones. Westbrook Estate stood silent in the morning light, its restored facade gleaming like a vision from another century. Vincent waited in the library, where ornate bookshelves now held period-appropriate volumes and reproduction artifacts. The hidden vault had been preserved as a historical feature, its door currently standing open to reveal the empty interior. The ledgers and ring box safely secured in Vincent's personal safe. The restoration was 2 weeks from completion, every detail executed according to Vincent's exacting standards. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had restored the Davidson ancestral home to its original glory, even as he systematically dismantled the family's power and reputation. Claire Davidson arrived precisely at 10, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that conveyed serious professionalism rather than fashion consciousness. She carried a slim leather portfolio, but no purse or other accessories. "You've done remarkable work here," she observed, taking in the library's meticulously restored details. "It's exactly as my mother described it from her childhood visits." Vincent gestured toward a seating area where coffee service had been arranged on an antique table. "You've verified my restoration. Now I need to verify your information." Claire took a seat, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "What have you concluded so far?" "That either you're exactly who you claim to be," Vincent replied, pouring coffee for them both, "or you're executing an elaborate deception orchestrated by what remains of the Davidson inner circle." "A fair assessment," Claire acknowledged, accepting the coffee without drinking it. "Have you received confirmation of my DNA test results?" "I have. They appear legitimate, though such things can be manipulated." Claire smiled slightly. "You're very thorough, Mr. Mercer. My mother would have approved." "Tell me about her," Vincent said, watching Claire's expressions carefully. "Elizabeth Davidson, Harold's daughter from his marriage to Catherine Sellers, 1966 to 1971. If Claire was surprised by his knowledge of these details, she didn't show it. "My mother was the great disappointment of Harold's life, a Davidson with a conscience. She recognized early the corruption at the heart of the family business and refused to participate, which resulted in her effective erasure from family history," Vincent noted. "More than erasure," Claire corrected. "Active suppression. Harold used his influence to block her career opportunities, sabotage her relationships, and eventually drive her into a kind of exile. She changed her name, moved across the country, and built a new life for herself and me. Yet maintained her investigation into family activities," Vincent observed. "It became her life's work," Claire confirmed. "A detailed accounting of Davidson crimes across 3 generations." Vincent studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "Revenge is a powerful motivator." "Justice is more powerful," Claire countered, "and more sustainable. A subtle distinction in practice," Vincent remarked. Claire set down her untouched coffee. "Not so subtle, Mr. Mercer. Revenge seeks personal satisfaction through another's suffering. Justice seeks balance, appropriate consequences for harmful actions." "And which are you pursuing, Ms. Davidson?" "Both," she admitted frankly. "I want personal satisfaction from seeing my grandfather's corrupt empire dismantled. But more importantly, I want the systemic corruption he fostered exposed and excised." Vincent nodded, appreciating her honesty. "That's essentially what Diana Lowell told me about you." Claire tensed slightly. "You've spoken with Diana about me?" "I have extensive resources for verification," Vincent said mildly. "Diana confirmed your mother's existence, your relationship, and your history of investigating the family." "I see." Claire relaxed marginally. "And what else has your verification revealed?" Vincent leaned forward. "That you've been strategic about your timing. You could have brought forward your evidence years ago, but you waited until I had already initiated the Davidson downfall." "I waited until success was possible," Claire corrected. "Previous attempts to expose the family were systematically neutralized. Your approach succeeded where others failed because you understood something essential about the Davidsons." "Which is?" "That they're builders at heart," Claire said. "Every generation has understood structural integrity, load-bearing elements, pressure points. You fought them on their own terms, architecturally." Vincent felt an unexpected sense of connection with this woman who articulated so clearly what had been his intuitive approach. "There's something you should see," he said, standing. He led her to a concealed panel beside the fireplace, pressing a hidden mechanism that caused the panel to slide silently open, revealing a small alcove. "Another vault?" Claire asked, peering into the space. A message center, Vincent explained. The original Davidson used this to leave instructions for associates. Arrangements too sensitive for written records. Claire stepped closer, examining the craftsmanship. I had no idea this existed. Few did, Vincent confirmed. It was concealed behind later renovations until our restoration work revealed it. Along with these, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew several folded pages. Photographs of the ledger entries he had discovered in the main vault. Claire examined them with growing interest. These confirm everything my mother suspected about the original Davidson's methods, she said after a moment. The foundation of coercion and manipulation was laid with the house itself. Which brings us to our potential partnership, Vincent said, taking the pages back. You have historical evidence. I have current leverage and strategic position. Together, we could indeed dismantle the entire corrupt network stemming from your family's influence. But you have concerns, Claire intuited. One primary concern, Vincent acknowledged. Your motivation. Specifically, what you expect to gain personally from this alliance. Claire's expression turned contemplative. A reasonable question. I have no interest in Davidson assets or influence. My professional life as an investigative journalist is quite separate from my family history. A journalist? Vincent raised an eyebrow. That wasn't in your background check. I use a professional pseudonym, Claire explained. Alexandra Winters. Perhaps you've read my exposés on corporate fraud in the healthcare industry. Vincent had indeed read those pieces, meticulously researched investigations that had led to regulatory overhauls and several high-profile prosecutions. Impressive work, but it doesn't answer my question about personal gain. Claire met his gaze directly. What I gain is completion, closure, the fulfillment of my mother's final wish, to see justice served not just on Harold, but on the entire corrupt system he perpetuated. Vincent considered this, noting the emotion that briefly surfaced in her otherwise composed demeanor. And afterward, once this mission is accomplished, I continue my work, she said simply. There's no shortage of corruption in need of exposure. Vincent made his decision. I propose a limited partnership focused on specific targets drawn from your evidence and my ongoing investigations. We coordinate but operate independently where possible. Maintaining deniability, Claire nodded. Prudent. Essential, Vincent corrected. Some of the methods I've employed fall into legal gray areas. I wouldn't want to compromise your journalistic integrity. A hint of amusement touched Claire's features. How considerate. But I should warn you, Mr. Mercer, my own methods aren't always strictly conventional. They spent the next 2 hours comparing notes, aligning targets, and establishing secure communication protocols. Claire's evidence complemented Vincent's ongoing operations with remarkable synergy, filling gaps in his understanding of the broader Davidson network while providing historical context for current patterns of influence. There's one name missing from your target list, Claire noted as they concluded their strategy session. Natalie. Vincent's expression revealed nothing. She's lost everything of value to her: social position, financial security, future prospects. The bankruptcy filing was merely the public acknowledgement of what was already reality. That's surprisingly merciful, Claire observed, given her role in the plan to destroy you. Not mercy, Vincent corrected. Calculation. Natalie's suffering is more complete in her current state than it would be through any additional action I might take. Claire studied him with newfound interest. You've left her alive but irrelevant. A fate worse than financial ruin for someone whose identity was built on status and appearance. Precisely. And Dominic Foster? His plea deal seems rather fortunate given his central role. His cooperation was necessary to reach higher value targets, Vincent explained. And his reduced sentence still encompasses significant prison time, followed by disbarment and financial penalties that will ensure he never regains his previous position. Claire nodded thoughtfully. You're more strategic than vindictive. That's unexpected. Effectiveness requires clarity, Vincent said. Emotion clouds judgment. Yet this entire campaign began with a profound emotional injury, Claire pointed out. At my grandfather's retirement party. Vincent didn't deny it. The emotional catalyst launched a strategic response. The injury revealed the threat, which necessitated my countermeasures. Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Parker Sullivan. Vincent excused himself to take it privately. "Vince," Parker sounded tense. "We have a situation. Harold Davidson was found dead this morning." Vincent absorbed this news with measured reaction. Natural causes? That's the official statement. But the timing is suspicious. He was scheduled to give additional testimony tomorrow regarding political connections. Location? His home. Under house arrest, remember? But here's the thing. The security monitoring system experienced a technical glitch for approximately 40 minutes last night. When it came back online, the surveillance showed Harold apparently sleeping. He was found unresponsive by his nurse this morning. Vincent processed this information quickly. Who had access to his residence? "That's where it gets interesting," Parker replied. "Natalie visited yesterday afternoon, stayed for 2 hours, left visibly upset, according to the security detail." "Interesting indeed," Vincent murmured. "Keep me updated on any developments." "And Parker?" "Increase our own security protocols immediately." When Vincent returned to the library, Claire was examining the architectural plans for Westbrook Estate displayed on one wall. "My grandfather is dead," she said without turning around. "I just received notification." Vincent studied her posture, looking for signs of distress or relief. "How do you feel about that?" "Complicated," Claire admitted, finally facing him. "The man was a monster in many ways, yet still my blood. I've spent so long pursuing justice for his crimes that I never considered how I'd feel when he was actually gone." "Justice outlives its targets," Vincent observed. "His death doesn't end our work." Claire nodded, composing herself. "If anything, it makes it more urgent. Without Harold as the central figure, the remaining network will reconfigure itself. Adapt, possibly become more dangerous." "My thoughts exactly," Vincent agreed. "We should accelerate our timeline." As they refined their strategy in light of this development, Vincent found himself increasingly impressed by Claire's analytical abilities and strategic insight. She approached the dismantling of corrupt networks with the same architectural precision he valued in restoration work, identifying key structural elements, planning their removal in the optimal sequence, anticipating the resulting stresses, and compensating accordingly. By late afternoon, they had established a comprehensive action plan targeting the remaining Davidson network. Judges who had ruled favorably on family matters, politicians who had facilitated zoning exceptions and regulatory waivers, business partners who had laundered influence and profits through seemingly legitimate enterprises. "One final question," Claire said as they concluded. "The Westbrook estate itself. What happens to it when the restoration is complete?" "It becomes a historical museum and educational center," Vincent explained. "The deed has been transferred to a nonprofit preservation trust." Claire smiled with genuine pleasure. "Perfect. The house that corruption built transformed into a monument to historical transparency." As she gathered her materials to leave, Vincent made a decision. "Claire, there's something else you should see." He led her to his vehicle, driving them to a secure storage facility on the outskirts of the city. Inside a climate-controlled unit, dozens of carefully labeled boxes contained organized evidence, the physical manifestation of Vincent's methodical dismantling of the Davidson empire. "This is," Claire breathed, taking in the scope of his collection. "Insurance," Vincent said simply. "And legacy. Everything here is duplicated in secure digital storage with deadman protocols. If anything happens to me, the entire archive is automatically distributed to law enforcement agencies, journalists, and regulatory bodies." Claire turned to him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You never intended to stop with Harold and his immediate circle." "No," Vincent confirmed. "From the moment I understood the true scope of their activities, I committed to complete demolition." "Why show me this now?" Vincent regarded her steadily. "Because if we're truly partners in this, you deserve to know exactly what you're part of. And because if anything does happen to me, someone needs to ensure the protocols execute properly." Claire nodded slowly, the weight of this trust evident in her expression. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." As they drove back to the city, Vincent received another call from Parker, this time with news that crystallized the next phase of their campaign. The medical examiner is ruling Harold's death as suspicious, Parker reported. Possible poisoning. And Natalie has disappeared. Her apartment was found empty, evidence of hasty packing. Vincent exchanged a glance with Claire. Interesting timing. There's more, Parker continued. Helena Reeves is claiming that Harold's death nullifies certain evidence agreements, as he can no longer testify to authenticate key documents. A predictable legal maneuver, Vincent noted. Unlikely to succeed, but it will cause delays. After ending the call, he brought Claire up to speed on these developments. Natalie fleeing suggests foreknowledge, Claire observed, either of Harold's death or of something equally damaging about to emerge. Either way, Vincent replied, it changes our immediate priorities. That evening, having established their partnership and initial strategy, Vincent returned to his apartment to find an unexpected delivery, a small package with no return address. Inside was the Davidson signet ring he had discovered in the Westbrook vault, along with a handwritten note. The prodigal son takes his rightful place. Welcome to the family, Vincent. N. Vincent studied the ring, turning it in the light to examine the intricate crest. Then, with deliberate finality, he placed it in a small evidence bag, labeled it meticulously, and added it to his growing archive of Davidson crimes and manipulation. Natalie's message was clear. She saw his methodical dismantling of her family's empire not as destruction, but as succession. In her mind, Vincent had become a Davidson in all but name, employing their own tactics against them with a skill that perversely earned her respect. She couldn't have miscalculated more completely. Vincent wasn't becoming a Davidson. He was ensuring that what the Davidsons represented would be systematically eradicated, not just their wealth and influence, but the entire corrupt foundation they had established across generations. He sent a brief text to Claire. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Be ready. Her response came moments later. Ready and committed. No mercy, no exceptions. Vincent smiled faintly at the echo of his own uncompromising philosophy. Perhaps she was more like him than he had initially recognized, determined, methodical, and absolutely unwilling to forgive those who had caused irreparable harm. The demolition was entering its final phase. What would rise from the cleared ground was becoming clearer. Not a new empire built on the corrupt foundation of the old, but something fundamentally different. A structure of accountability, transparency, and justice that would make the corruption of the past impossible to rebuild. Chapter 9. The Final Beam. 1 year to the day after Harold Davidson's retirement party, Vincent stood alone on the terrace of the fully restored Westbrook estate. The property's formal gardens had been replanted according to original designs, though the modern irrigation system concealed beneath the classical landscape ensured sustainability that the original Davidson builder had never considered. The grand opening of the Westbrook Historical Center was scheduled for the following day, a civic celebration expected to draw officials, preservationists, and media from across the country. The Davidson family home had been transformed into a museum dedicated to architectural preservation and historical transparency, with one wing specifically focused on documenting the rise and fall of corrupt power structures in the city's development. Vincent's phone chimed with a notification. The final judgment in the Davidson Enterprises bankruptcy proceedings had been entered. The remaining legitimate assets had been distributed to creditors, pension claimants, and various restitution funds. The Davidson name now existed primarily in cautionary business ethics case studies and law enforcement databases. Over the past year, Vincent and Claire had methodically executed their plan to dismantle the broader Davidson network. 27 indictments, 15 convictions, 9 plea agreements, 3 judicial resignations, and 2 regulatory overhauls later, the corrupt ecosystem that had sustained Davidson influence for generations had been comprehensively dismantled. Claire had published a series of explosive investigative articles under her Alexandra Winters byline, documenting the historical pattern of corruption with evidence so irrefutable that even the most powerful figures implicated had been unable to evade consequences. Her work had earned national recognition, including a prestigious journalism award. Vincent had maintained his more shadowed role, providing evidence and strategic direction while focusing publicly on the Westbrook restoration and the continued growth of Mercer Restoration, which had become the region's premier historical preservation firm. "I thought I'd find you here." Claire's voice interrupted his thoughts as she joined him on the terrace. "Contemplating your masterpiece." Vincent turned to greet her. Over the past year, their professional partnership had evolved into something more complex. Not quite friendship, but a deep mutual respect founded on shared purpose and complementary methods. "Considering symmetry," he corrected. "1 year ago today, I stood in a different ballroom, holding a serving tray while your grandfather prepared to sacrifice me for family preservation." Claire nodded, understanding the significance. "And tomorrow, the world celebrates your restoration of the physical Davidson legacy, while the family itself has been consigned to history's cautionary chapters." "Poetic justice," Vincent agreed. "Speaking of justice," Claire said, her tone shifting to business, "I received confirmation that Natalie has been located in Argentina. Local authorities are cooperating with the extradition request." Vincent absorbed this information with characteristically measured reaction. Following Harold's death, eventually ruled as poisoning by sophisticated means, Natalie had disappeared with remaining liquid assets from several hidden accounts. International warrants had been issued, but she had managed to elude authorities until now. "And Foster?" Vincent asked. "Still cooperating from federal custody," Claire confirmed. "His testimony in the Westridge case was particularly effective. 3 more indictments expected next week." Vincent nodded, satisfied with the progress. "And Helena?" "Sentencing next month. Her health is failing, but not quickly enough to keep her from significant prison time." They stood in comfortable silence, surveying the grounds of the estate that symbolized both the beginning and end of Davidson influence. "I've been offered a position with a National Investigative Journalism Center," Claire said after a moment, "leading a team focused on systematic corruption in infrastructure development." "You should take it," Vincent said without hesitation. "Your work deserves broader platform and resources." Claire studied him with a perceptive gaze that had made her such an effective investigator. "What about you, Vincent? What comes after this?" It was a question he had been considering with increasing frequency. The Davidson Project, as he had come to think of it, had consumed him for over a year. Its approaching completion left an uncertain future. "Mercer Restoration continues," he said. "There are other historical properties deserving preservation." "That's the business," Claire noted. "I'm asking about the man." Vincent considered this distinction. "The man continues as well, perhaps with a different focus. Other corrupt systems to dismantle," Claire suggested. "Perhaps," Vincent allowed. "Or perhaps something constructive rather than destructive." "You've always been a builder at heart," Claire observed. "Even your demolition was precisely engineered." Before Vincent could respond, Parker Sullivan approached from the main house, tablet in hand. "Final inspection reports are all positive," Parker announced. "Historical Commission has signed off completely. We're officially done." Vincent nodded. "Thank you, Parker, for everything." The depth of meaning in those simple words wasn't lost on his longtime friend and ally. Parker had stood by him through the entire Davidson campaign, despite occasional moral qualms about certain tactics. "Pleasure and privilege," Parker replied with equal simplicity. "What's next on the agenda?" "Tomorrow's opening ceremony," Vincent said. "Then we'll see." After Parker returned to the house, Claire's phone chimed with a notification. She checked it, her expression tightening. "What is it?" Vincent asked. "A message from my source in federal marshals," Claire replied. "Natalie is claiming to have evidence implicating you in Harold's death. Says she'll only surrender it in exchange for immunity." Vincent's expression didn't change. An expected maneuver. Desperate, but predictable. Claire studied him carefully. "Is there any substance to her claim?" "None whatsoever," Vincent said calmly. "I didn't kill Harold Davidson, though I can't pretend to mourn him." "The timing of his death was remarkably convenient," Claire observed neutrally. "For several parties," Vincent acknowledged, "including Natalie herself, who visited him hours before his death and fled immediately after." Claire nodded, accepting his answer. I never truly believed you were involved. Your methods have always been more elegant than murder. I dismantle systems, not people, Vincent confirmed. Harold's death was unnecessary to my objectives and potentially counterproductive, as it complicated certain evidence chains. What do you think Natalie hopes to gain with this claim? Claire asked. Time, Vincent replied. Leverage. Perhaps a better plea arrangement. She's applying the Davidson playbook, when cornered, create confusion and implicate others. A strategy that no longer works now that the playbook itself has been exposed, Claire noted with satisfaction. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the restored gardens, Vincent found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The humiliation of the retirement party seemed distant now, not forgotten, but transformed into the catalyst for a campaign of justice more comprehensive than he could have initially imagined. I should go, Claire said, checking her watch. Final edits on tomorrow's piece before the ceremony. Vincent nodded. The full expose on the Davidson legacy? It's appropriate timing. A fitting conclusion, Claire agreed. Though not quite the end of our work. No, Vincent confirmed. Not quite the end. After Claire left, Vincent remained on the terrace as darkness fell and lights automatically illuminated the gardens. Tomorrow, this property would become public, a monument to preservation and transparency. The final step in transforming the Davidson legacy from power and corruption to historical caution. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown international number. It was never personal, Vincent, just family business. I did what was expected, as did you. Perhaps we're not so different after all. N. Vincent read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Natalie still didn't understand. For the Davidsons, nothing had ever been personal. People were merely assets or obstacles to be utilized or removed according to family interest. For Vincent, everything was personal. Every decision, every action, every consequence, all stemming from a fundamental belief in personal responsibility and accountability. The very antithesis of the Davidson philosophy. His phone rang. Parker again. Vince, there's a situation at the main entrance. Security just stopped someone trying to access the property. Says she's your daughter. Vincent froze. I don't have a daughter. That's what I told security, Parker confirmed. But she's insistent. Young woman, maybe 20, has documentation supposedly proving relation. Says her name is Sophia Mercer. Vincent's mind raced through possibilities. A Davidson tactic? A desperate attempt by Natalie to create leverage? Or was something else entirely? Bring her to my office, Vincent instructed. Full security protocols. I want to hear what she has to say. 20 minutes later, Vincent studied the young woman seated across from him in the estate's restored library. Sophia Mercer, if that was indeed her name, had his eyes and jawline, combined with features that triggered uncomfortable recognition from a relationship long before Natalie. You honestly had no idea I existed? Sophia asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. None, Vincent confirmed, still processing the documentation she had provided. Birth certificate, photographs, DNA test results. Your mother never informed me of her pregnancy. She said you were focused on building your company, Sophia explained. That you made it clear you weren't interested in family responsibilities. Vincent recalled Rebecca Chambers. A brief relationship during the early days of Mercer Restoration ended amicably when their career paths diverged. She had moved to the West Coast for a job opportunity, and they had lost touch. That's not accurate, Vincent said carefully. Had I known, I would have acknowledged my responsibilities. Sophia nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Mom admitted recently that she made that choice unilaterally. That's partly why I'm here. Why now? Vincent asked. Why today specifically? I've been following your work, Sophia explained. The Davidson expose, the restoration of this estate. I'm studying architectural preservation at university. Your company's approach is revolutionary. Vincent absorbed this information, noting the precise way she analyzed the room's restoration details even as they spoke, a familiar trait that resonated uncomfortably. That explains your interest in my work, Vincent acknowledged. Not your timing. Sophia met his gaze directly, another familiar trait. Mom is dying. Cancer. She wanted me to know my father before. She paused, composing herself. I've known about you my whole life. She kept detailed records, followed your career. I've just been working up the courage to make contact. Vincent processed this revelation with the same controlled exterior he maintained through all significant developments, though internally a profound shift was occurring. I'll need to verify this information, he said finally. Of course, Sophia agreed readily. I expected nothing less. The conversation continued for another hour. Sophia, describing her upbringing in Seattle, her education, her own interest in historical architecture that had developed independently of any knowledge of her father's specific expertise. Throughout, Vincent observed her mannerisms, her analytical approach to describing complex subjects, her careful emotional containment, all reflecting aspects of himself so precisely that DNA verification seemed almost redundant. After security escorted Sophia to accommodations arranged at a nearby hotel, with promises of continued conversation the following day pending verification, Vincent sat alone in the library, considering this unexpected development. Parker joined him, concern evident in his expression. Initial verification checks support her claims, he reported. Rebecca Chambers exists, worked for Wallace Design until her medical leave 3 months ago. Sophia's educational records match her story. Vincent nodded, processing. Continue comprehensive verification. Discreetly. Of course, Parker agreed. But Vince, she does look like you. Yes, Vincent acknowledged. She does. After Parker left, Vincent returned to the terrace. The restored Davidson estate spread before him in moonlight. The symmetry he had noted earlier had taken on new dimensions. As he completed the dismantling of one family legacy built on corruption and manipulation, the possibility of a genuine family connection had emerged unexpectedly. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Final article approved for publication after tomorrow's ceremony. The Davidson chapter closes definitively. What comes next for you? Vincent considered the question, looking out over the grounds of Westbrook Estate, a property built by the original Davidson as a monument to corrupt power, now transformed into a center for historical truth and preservation. The demolition was complete. The foundation had been exposed, the corrupt structure dismantled. Now came the greater challenge, building something worthy in its place. His reply to Claire was simple. Something new, something better. As he stood alone under the night sky, Vincent Mercer, builder, destroyer, and now possibly father, allowed himself to contemplate a future not defined by vengeance but by creation. The final beam of his demolition project would become the first stone of something entirely different. The last gift Harold Davidson had unknowingly given him wasn't the Westbrook contract or the validation at the retirement party. It was the catalyst for complete transformation, the opportunity to dismantle not just the Davidson empire, but the limitations of his own past. Tomorrow, the world would witness the culmination of his vengeful precision. But after that would come something even Harold Davidson could never have anticipated. A legacy built on truth rather than deception, creation rather than destruction, and a foundation strong enough to support generations to come. Vincent smiled faintly at the symmetry of it all, standing exactly 1 year later, no longer an outsider holding a serving tray, but the architect of his own destiny and perhaps, unexpectedly, a family legacy worthy of preservation. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Carson Black learned 3 things in prison: patience, perception, and that revenge served cold taste sweetest. 10 years ago, he'd been a nobody, a mechanic's son from Detroit who made one mistake that cost him 5 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. The evidence had been fabricated, the witnesses bought, and the judge? Well, Judge Earl Page had a reputation for being merciless, especially to young men who couldn't afford proper lawyers. Now, Carson owned 4 legitimate businesses across 3 states, drove a Mercedes S-Class, and wore custom-tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He'd built his empire from nothing, using the connections he'd made inside, the hard lessons he'd learned, and an iron will that prison had forged rather than broken. And he'd married Earl Page's daughter. Carson stood in his home office, a converted loft in downtown Chicago overlooking Lake Michigan. The setting sun painted the water orange and gold. He swirled the bourbon in his glass, watching the ice catch the light, and thought about the board he'd been playing on for 3 years. Carson, Christine's voice drifted up the stairs. Are you coming to dinner? Dr. Christine Page Black. Beautiful, accomplished, and completely unaware that her husband knew every detail of the scheme she and her father had been orchestrating since before they'd even met. 2 minutes, sweetheart, he called back, setting down his glass. He pulled out his phone and texted Lucas Phillips, his oldest friend and only real confidant. It's almost time. The reply came instantly. You sure about this? No going back. Carson smiled. I've been sure for 10 years. 3 years ago, Carson had learned that Earl Page was looking for a wealthy husband for his daughter. The judge had retired, but his lifestyle hadn't. Expensive tastes, private clubs, a vacation home in Aspen. His pension wasn't enough. Christine's medical practice, while successful, had been mortgaged to the hilt to fund his lifestyle. They needed money. Specifically, they needed someone rich to marry Christine, someone they could later divorce and fleece in the settlement. Carson had made himself the perfect target. He'd courted Christine at a medical conference where he'd accidentally bumped into her. He'd played the part of the self-made businessman, flashing just enough wealth to be interesting, but not so much that he seemed too careful with it. He'd been charming, attentive, and just damaged enough, mentioning his troubled past in vague terms, to appeal to her doctor's instinct to heal. She'd fallen for the role he'd played, or she pretended to. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Earl Page had approved of the marriage eagerly, seeing exactly what Carson wanted him to see, an easy mark with deep pockets and shallow roots. The wedding had been beautiful. Carson had spared no expense, another signal that he was careless with money. Earl had given a toast about how his daughter deserved only the best, how Carson seemed like exactly the right kind of man. Carson had met Lucas's eyes across the reception hall and thought, you have no idea. Now, 18 months into the marriage, the trap was set. Carson had slowly transferred assets into accounts that looked vulnerable, had made investments that appeared foolish, had even staged a few financial setbacks that made Christine and her father think the time was right. He headed downstairs to the dining room, where Christine had set the table with her usual precision. She looked up, her dark hair catching the chandelier light, and smiled. Long day? She asked. The Henderson deal fell through, Carson said, sitting down. This was the signal, the last piece clicking into place. We're looking at significant losses. Her expression flickered, concern on the surface, but Carson caught the calculation underneath. How significant? 7 figures. Maybe 8. He reached for the wine, playing the part of a man trying to stay calm. I might need to liquidate some of the safer assets to cover it. I'm so sorry, honey. She touched his hand. Is there anything I can do? Just having you here helps. He squeezed her fingers. Your father called earlier, actually. Asked if we could meet for drinks tomorrow. Did he? Too casual. What for? Said he had some investment opportunities to discuss. Might be good timing, actually. Christine's smile was warm, supportive, and completely fraudulent. Dad always knows how to help in situations like this. Carson knew exactly what Earl would propose tomorrow, a chance to invest in a guaranteed opportunity, one that would require Carson to sign over control of certain accounts. The setup for the theft that would look like bad business decisions rather than fraud. They'd take everything they thought he had, file for divorce, and by the time Carson realized what happened, they'd be untouchable, his money gone, his reputation ruined, his wife walking away with the victim narrative of a woman married to a failed businessman. That was their plan. Carson cut into his steak, savoring the irony. Everything they thought they knew about his finances was theater. The real money, the accounts they'd never found, the offshore investments, the shell companies, remained hidden. What they'd be stealing was bait, poisoned and waiting. "How was the practice today?" he asked. Christine launched into a story about a difficult patient, and Carson listened with apparent attention while his mind worked through the next 48 hours. Earl would make his move tomorrow night. By Friday, they'd have executed their theft. By Saturday, Christine would discover the devastation and call her father crying. And then, this was the beautiful part, Earl would make his one phone call to activate the plan they thought would destroy Carson completely. Instead, it would be the moment Carson destroyed them. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "The files are ready." "Jesus, Carson, the stuff you got on this guy." Carson excused himself to the bathroom and replied, "He put me in a cage for 5 years for something I didn't do. He's about to learn what it feels like." When he returned to the table, Christine was checking her own phone, her expression troubled. "Everything okay?" Carson asked. She looked up, and for a moment, he saw something in her eyes, doubt, guilt, before she smiled again. "Fine, just a patient follow-up." Carson wondered if she ever thought about the man she was betraying, if she ever felt anything real for him. Probably not. Her father had raised her in his image. Take what you can, use who you must, and never look back. She learned soon enough that some people look back constantly, planning every step of their return. Chapter 2. The Doctor's Shadow. Christine Page Black had learned 3 things from her father. Appearances matter, emotions are weapons, and trust is for fools. She watched Carson walk upstairs to his office, bourbon glass in hand, and felt the familiar twist of something uncomfortably close to guilt. 3 years. 3 years of playing the loving wife, of sharing a bed with a man she was helping her father destroy. Some nights, when Carson held her and whispered sweet things in the dark, she almost forgot it was all a performance, his and hers. Almost. Her phone buzzed. "Earl, is he taking the bait?" Christine typed back. "Henderson deal failed today. He's worried." "Good. Tomorrow night, we close this. You ready?" She stared at the message. Was she ready? She'd been preparing for this moment since before she'd met Carson at that medical conference. The handsome businessman with the tragic past and the obvious wealth. Earl had done his research. Carson Black, self-made entrepreneur, no family to speak of, various business ventures that appeared successful but vulnerable. The perfect mark for a man who'd spent 30 years on the bench, learning to read people and finding their weaknesses. Christine typed, "Ready." But her hands shook slightly as she cleared the dinner table. She'd never questioned her father before. Earl Page had raised her alone after her mother died when Christine was 7. He'd worked 3 jobs early on, he always said, sacrificing everything to put her through medical school. She owed him everything. Except, she was starting to realize that debt had no bottom. The medical practice Earl had convinced her to buy, mortgage to fund his lifestyle, the vacation home, in her name, but he lived there. The investments he guided her toward, all failures that somehow left her deeper in debt while he continued spending freely. And now this. Marry a rich man, help steal his fortune, divorce him, split the take. It's not really stealing, Earl had explained when he first proposed the plan. Men like Carson Black don't earn their money honestly. You think he's legitimate? He's probably running cons of his own. We're just making sure justice is served. You deserve this, Christine. After everything you've been through, everything you've sacrificed. She believed him because she always believed him. Earl Page had been a judge for 30 years, who understood justice better. But lately, small things nagged at her. The way Carson sometimes looked at her, like he could see straight through to her thoughts. The way he'd been almost too easy to manipulate, too perfectly falling into the patterns Earl had predicted. The way his friend, Lucas Phillips, sometimes watched her with something that looked like pity. Christine poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone to the photos from their wedding. Carson in his tuxedo, spinning her across the dance floor. His smile had seemed so genuine. Or maybe she just wanted to believe it was. Her mother would have hated this. Aileen Page had been kind, gentle, everything Earl wasn't. Christine barely remembered her, just fragments of warmth and laughter, the smell of vanilla perfume, soft hands tucking her into bed. Then cancer, sudden and vicious. And then just Earl, hardening year by year into something cold and calculating, teaching his daughter that the world was predators and prey. Choose which one you want to be, he told her when she was 16, because there's no middle ground. Christine had chosen predator. But predators, she was learning, didn't lie awake at night wondering if their prey had feelings, if maybe they'd made a mistake, if perhaps. Her phone rang. Earl, did you confirm tomorrow? He asked without preamble. He'll be there. Perfect. Gino's finalizing the paperwork tonight. Once Carson signs over the investment accounts tomorrow, we trigger the cascade. By Friday morning, the accounts drain, the shell companies collapse, and it'll look like his own bad decisions. Gino Briggs, another piece of her father's machinery, a lawyer who specialized in creative financial destruction. Christine had met him once and immediately disliked his cold eyes and colder smile. What if? Christine started, then stopped. What if what? What if Carson's smarter than we think? Earl laughed, that confident bark she'd heard him use from the bench when dismissing defense attorneys. Sweetheart, I've been reading people for 30 years. Carson Black is a street kid who got lucky in business. He's got money but no sophistication, no real power. By Saturday, he'll be ruined, and you'll be free with enough money to never worry again. And if he fights back, with what? We're taking everything. And even if he tries, I still have connections, judges, lawyers, people who owe me favors. He's got nothing but money, and that'll be gone. Christine ended the call and sat in the silence of the expensive house her husband had bought, surrounded by the life he'd built for her, and wondered why she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Upstairs, she heard Carson moving around in his office. 3 years of marriage, and she still didn't really know him. He'd shared pieces of his past, growing up poor in Detroit, losing his parents young, making mistakes he regretted, but always vaguely, always holding something back. What was he holding back? She thought about the way he'd mentioned his mistakes, once his eyes going distant and hard. I spent 5 years paying for something I didn't do, he'd said. That teaches you to be careful about who you trust. At the time, she thought he meant some business failure, maybe a bankruptcy or lawsuit. But now, with everything about to come crashing down, she wondered if he'd meant something else entirely. Christine climbed the stairs, pausing outside his office. Through the gap in the door, she saw him at his desk, typing on his laptop, his expression focused and intense. For a moment, just a moment, she considered warning him, telling him to run, to protect himself, to get away from her and her father's trap. But then she thought of her debts, her father's expectations, the life she'd been promised if she just played her part. She thought of all the times Earl had told her she was special, deserving, that the world owed her something for her mother's death and her hard childhood. She knocked softly. Carson looked up and smiled, and the warmth in his eyes made her stomach twist. Come in, he said. She sat on the edge of his desk. I was thinking about tomorrow. Are you sure about meeting with my father? If you're stressed about the Henderson deal. I'm fine. He touched her hand. Your father's been good to us. If he has ideas, I should listen. Us. As if they were a team. Christine leaned down and kissed him, and when he pulled her close, she closed her eyes and tried not to think about what she was about to help destroy. Chapter 3. The Performance. The bar where Carson met Earl Page was the kind of place judges and lawyers have been making deals since Prohibition. Dark wood, leather booths, and bartenders who knew when to be deaf. Earl sat in the back corner, silver-haired and distinguished in his cashmere coat, looking every inch the respectable retired judge. He stood when Carson approached, offering his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Carson, my boy, thanks for making time. They ordered drinks, Earl's usual single malt, Carson's bourbon, and engaged in the ritual small talk about weather and sports. Carson played his part perfectly, the worried businessman trying to hide his stress, the son-in-law grateful for guidance. Christine mentioned the Henderson deal. Earl said finally, That's rough, son. It happens. Carson shrugged with practiced resignation. I made some assumptions about the market that didn't pan out. How bad is it? Bad enough that I need to restructure some assets. I'm meeting with my accountant tomorrow to figure out which holdings to liquidate. Earl leaned forward, his expression sympathetic and predatory all at once. I might be able to help with that. I've got a friend, Gino Briggs, sharp lawyer, who specializes in financial recovery. He's got an opportunity that might be exactly what you need. Here it was, the trap laid with all the subtlety of a bear trap covered in leaves. I'm listening, Carson said. For the next 30 minutes, Earl wove a beautiful fiction about an investment opportunity. Guaranteed returns, minimal risk, but we need to move fast. All Carson had to do was consolidate certain accounts, sign some transfer paperwork, and within months, he'd have recovered his Henderson losses and then some. Carson asked the right questions, showed the right hesitation, and finally agreed to meet with Gino the next day to review the paperwork. Earl clasped his shoulder. This is going to work out, Carson. Trust me. Trust. The word landed between them like a blade. Carson thought about trust. How Earl Page had betrayed it when he'd accepted bribes to convict innocent men. How he betrayed his daughter by turning her into a weapon. How he sat here now, about to steal from his own son-in-law, and felt nothing but satisfaction. I do trust you, Carson lied smoothly. You've been like a father to me. Something flickered in Earl's eyes. Surprise? Discomfort before the mask slid back into place. Family takes care of family, he said. They finished their drinks and parted with a handshake. Carson watched Earl walk to his car, a new Audi he'd bought with money from Christine's mortgage practice, and pulled out his phone. Lucas answered on the first ring. How'd it go? Like clockwork. Tomorrow I meet with Gino, sign the papers. By Friday morning, they think they'll have everything. And then we show them what happens when you corner a wolf. Carson drove home slowly, savoring these last hours before the performance reached its climax. He'd spent 3 years building this moment, every day an act, every night sleeping beside a woman who was helping her father destroy him. Or so they thought. The truth was simpler and more devastating. Carson had never been the mark. They had. When he got home, Christine was waiting up, curled on the couch with a medical journal she wasn't really reading. How was Dad? She asked. Helpful as always. He connected me with a lawyer who might be able to help with the Henderson situation. Carson sat beside her. Actually, I need to ask you something. She tensed slightly. What? The accounts I set up when we got married. The joint ones with your name on them? I might need to consolidate those with some of my business holdings. Just temporarily, to make the numbers work for this investment opportunity. That okay with you? This was it. The moment she'd give him access to steal from himself, thinking she was helping her father steal from him. Christine hesitated, and Carson saw the war behind her eyes. Then, of course, whatever you need. Thank you. He kissed her forehead. I know this has been stressful, but your father's right. This is going to work out. That night, Carson lay beside his sleeping wife and thought about justice. Not the kind Earl Page had dispensed from his bench. Corrupt, for sale to the highest bidder. Real justice. The kind that came from patience and precision, from understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Carson met Gino Briggs at a downtown office. The lawyer was everything Carson expected. Expensive suit, reptilian smile, hands that had signed away people's lives for a percentage. Mr. Black, pleasure. Gino spread papers across the conference table. Judge Page has explained your situation. This investment vehicle is exactly what you need. Carson reviewed the documents with apparent care. In reality, he'd seen these same papers 2 weeks ago when Lucas had hacked Gino's server. Part of the preparation, understanding every detail of the trap being set. He signed. Gino witnessed. By end of business, the consolidation would be complete. You've made a smart decision, Gino said, shaking his hand. Carson smiled. I learned from the best. He went home and waited. Lucas texted updates throughout the day. Accounts moving, transfers initiating, the cascade beginning. By evening, it will be done. Christine came home early from the practice, her expression tight with something like dread. Long day, Carson asked, pouring himself a drink. Yeah, she set down her bag, not meeting his eyes. How did it go with Gino? Good. Everything's signed. He studied her face. You seem worried. I'm fine. Just tired. At 6:47 p.m., Carson's phone rang. His accountant, really Lucas, playing a role, voice panicked. Mr. Black, we have a serious problem. Multiple accounts are showing unauthorized transfers. It looks like everything's being drained. Carson put the call on speaker so Christine could hear, watching her face go pale. What? How is that possible? The consolidation you authorized this morning, something's wrong with it. The investment vehicle is a shell. The funds are being routed through offshore accounts. I'm trying to stop it, but... Fix it, Carson roared. Fix it now. I'm trying, but by morning, Mr. Black, you could lose everything. Carson ended the call and turned to Christine, his expression a mask of devastation. What have I done? She stood frozen, and he saw it all on her face. The guilt, the fear, the realization that she'd helped destroy him. He let the moment breathe, let her feel the weight of it, then pulled out his phone again with shaking hands. Who are you calling? She whispered. Your father. He needs to know that his connection just ruined us. Earl answered on the third ring. Carson, the investment was a fraud, Carson said, his voice breaking perfectly. Gino's gone. The accounts are empty. We've lost everything. Christine's practice, my businesses, all of it. How could you do this? How could you bring us to someone who... Now wait just a minute. You said trust you. You said family. And now, Carson grabbed his keys. I'm done. I'm fucking done with all of this. Carson, where are you going? Away from you. Away from your daughter. Away from this disaster you created. He looked at Christine, putting all the venom he'd been saving into his voice. Tell your father thank you. Thank you for showing me what a mistake this marriage was. What a mistake trusting either of you was. Carson, please. Christine reached for him, and the tears in her eyes almost looked real. He pulled away. Your fault for raising a weak woman, he said to Earl, still on the phone. That's what you created, someone who lets her father destroy her life. I want a divorce. I want out. And you, Judge, you're going to answer for this. He hung up, grabbed his overnight bag, already packed, of course, and walked out. Behind him, he heard Christine start to sob. Whether from relief that the performance was complete or genuine emotion, he neither knew nor cared. Carson got in his car and drove to Lucas's apartment across town, where his friend was waiting with a laptop and a smile. Phase 1 complete, Lucas said. They think you're destroyed. Perfect. Carson sat down, pulled up the hidden camera feeds from his house. He'd installed them months ago, and watched Christine on her phone, calling Earl in a panic. On another screen, Earl's location tracker showed him leaving his house, heading toward Gino's office. And on a third screen, the real accounts, the ones they'd never found, never knew existed, showed balances in the tens of millions, untouched and waiting. Now, Carson said, we show them the truth. Chapter 4, The Hunter's Education. 24 hours earlier, Carson had made a phone call of his own. Douglas Berry speaking. The gravelly voice answered. Mr. Berry, this is Carson Black. We spoke a few months ago about your investigative services. Douglas Berry was a legend among those who knew where to look. A former FBI agent who'd gone private after he'd refused to look the other way on a corruption case that reached too high. He specialized in the kind of investigations that ended careers and occasionally landed people in prison. He was also expensive, thorough, and absolutely merciless. I remember, Berry said, you want a background on Judge Earl Page. I told you what I found would cost 6 figures and might not be pretty. I'm ready to hear it. All of it. What Carson learned in the next 3 hours have been both horrifying and perfect. Earl Page hadn't worked 3 jobs to put Christine through medical school. That was a lie he'd told so often even he believed it. The truth was simpler. He'd embezzled money from court fees, accepted bribes from defense attorneys and prosecutors alike, and built a nest egg on the backs of the innocent people he'd sent to prison. Men like Carson. Carson's case had been one of dozens. A young mechanic accused of stealing cars and running a chop shop. The evidence had been planted, the witnesses paid, and Earl Page had accepted $10,000 to guarantee a conviction from the real criminal. a connected dealer named Marcus Lane who'd wanted a fall guy. 5 years of Carson's life, stolen for $10,000. But that wasn't all. Barry's investigation had uncovered something even darker. Earl's wife, Eileen, hadn't died of cancer. She died of an overdose, pills mixed with alcohol, after discovering her husband's corruption. The death had been ruled accidental, but Barry had found Eileen's diary, hidden in a safety deposit box she'd opened a week before she died. In it, she'd written about confronting Earl, about his threats, about her fear for Christine. The last entry, dated the day before her death. He said if I expose him, I'll lose everything. Christine will lose everything. But how can I stay silent? What am I teaching my daughter? The next day, she was dead. Earl had raised Christine alone, shaping her in his image, using grief and obligation to turn her into another weapon in his arsenal. Carson had listened to all of this, his rage cold and calculating, and made his decision. I want everything documented, he told Barry. Every bribe, every case, every connection. And I want the diary. What are you planning to do with this? Justice, Carson said simply. The kind Earl Page never delivered. Now, sitting in Lucas's apartment, watching the camera feeds as Christine sobbed and Earl paced, Carson pulled up the files Barry had delivered. You know this is enough to put him away for 20 years, right? Lucas said, looking over his shoulder. You could just go to the FBI and give him a chance to make deals, to use his connections. Carson shook his head. No, he needs to understand what he did. Every single person he hurt needs to see him fall. Lucas had been Carson's cellmate for 2 of the 5 years inside. A white-collar criminal who'd actually been guilty, stock fraud. Lucas had taught Carson how money really worked, how to hide it, move it, make it invisible. In return, Carson had protected him from the predators that circled in prison. When they'd both gotten out, Lucas had gone legitimate, become a financial consultant. But he'd never forgotten his friend, and when Carson had explained his plan 3 years ago, Lucas had signed on without hesitation. He stole 5 years from you, Lucas had said. Let's take his whole life. They'd built Carson's empire together, carefully and quietly. Lucas handled the real money while Carson created the facade, the flashy businesses, the public profile, the perfect bait for a man like Earl Page. And it had worked beautifully. Carson's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Gino. We have a problem. Meet me at the warehouse. 1 hour. Come alone. Carson smiled. Right on schedule. The lawyer's panicking, he told Lucas. They're realizing the money's not where they expected. What did you do? Change the routing at the last second. Instead of offshore accounts they control, everything went into an escrow under Barry's name. They tried to steal $7 million. Instead, they just handed me evidence of attempted fraud. Lucas whistled. Damn. And now they're scrambling to figure out what went wrong, which means they'll make mistakes. Carson stood, grabbed his jacket. I'm going to meet Gino. You monitor Earl and Christine. You sure about going alone? These guys play rough. Carson's smile was cold. So do I. The warehouse was in an industrial area south of the city, the kind of place where security cameras didn't work and nobody asked questions. Carson pulled up in a nondescript rental car, not his Mercedes, and found Gino Briggs waiting with 2 other men, neither of whom were lawyers. Mr. Black, Gino said, his reptilian smile gone, replaced by something harder. We need to talk about the money. What money? Carson kept his hands visible, his posture relaxed. The money you stole from me? Don't play games. The transfers went through, but the receiving accounts are frozen. We need you to authorize the release. Or what? The 2 men, muscle, clearly, stepped forward. One of them cracked his knuckles. Or we convince you, Gino said. Carson had learned to fight in prison. Not the Hollywood kind, but the brutal, efficient kind that assumed every fight might be your last. He'd also learned something more important, when to use words instead of fists. Touch me, and you'll regret it, Carson said calmly. I've got this conversation being recorded and transmitted to 3 different locations. Assault me, and you won't make it out of the city before the police pick you up. Gino's expression flickered with uncertainty. But here's what I'm willing to offer, Carson continued. A way out. For you anyway. I'm listening. I know Earl Page hired you to set up this fraud. I know he's been using you for years to clean up his dirty work. What I'm offering is immunity. You testify against him, provide documentation of his crimes, and I'll make sure the fraud charges disappear. You're not the DA. No, but Douglas Berry is about to deliver a very comprehensive file to the FBI. When that happens, they're going to be very interested in anyone connected to Earl's operations. You can be a witness or a defendant. Choose wisely. Gino stared at him, recalculating. What's to stop me from just calling Earl and warning him? Nothing. Except that Earl's going to throw you under the bus the second he realizes the plan failed. Men like him always do. You're just a tool to him. But to me, you're leverage. Carson pulled out a business card, Barry's card, and held it out. You've got 24 hours to decide. After that, the FBI gets everything and you get nothing. He walked away without waiting for an answer, trusting that fear and self-preservation would do the rest. Back in the car, his hands shook slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up. He texted Lucas. Gino's scared. He'll flip. Earl just showed up at your house. Christine won't let him in. She's crying. Carson felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but close. For Christine. She was a victim too, in her way. Earl had poisoned her from childhood, taught her to be what he needed. But she'd made her choices, and now she'd face the consequences. He drove to a hotel downtown, checked in under a fake name, and spent the night reviewing phase 2 of his plan. By morning, everyone involved would understand that they'd made a catastrophic mistake. By the end of the week, Earl Page's entire world would be ashes. Carson stared out at the Chicago skyline and thought about the moment Earl had sentenced him. The judge hadn't even looked at him, just read the verdict with bored indifference, destroyed a young man's life without a second thought. 5 years. Carson whispered to the city lights. I'm taking 50. Chapter 5, The Daughter's Choice. Christine sat in her living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she'd helped destroy, and tried to remember when she'd become someone she didn't recognize. Her father had been calling non-stop since Carson walked out. She'd ignored the first dozen calls, then finally answered just to make it stop. Let me in, Earl demanded from outside. We need to talk. Go away. Christine, open the damn door. This is a disaster, and we need to... No. The word surprised her with its firmness. You need to leave. What are you talking about? Sweetheart, I know this looks bad, but we can fix it. Gino screwed up, but we'll find the money. Did you love her? Silence. Then what? Mom, did you love her? This isn't the time. Answer the question. Christine stood, walked to the door, but didn't open it. Because I've been thinking about her. About the things you told me. About how she died. Cancer. She died of. I found her diary, Dad. The silence on the other side of the door was absolute. Christine had discovered it the week before, hidden in a box of her mother's things in the attic. She'd been looking for old photos, wanting to remember something real, something pure. Instead, she'd found the truth. I know what you are, she said quietly. What you did to Carson. What you did to Mom. What you turned me into. You don't understand. I understand that Carson's probably known the whole time. This whole marriage, this whole plan, I think he knew. And I think whatever's coming next, we deserve it. She heard her father's fist hit the door. Don't you dare. Don't you dare side with him over me. I raised you. I sacrificed everything. You sacrificed nothing. The words burst out of her. You stole. You lied. You murdered your own wife to keep her quiet. That's not. She took those pills herself. I never. You drove her to it. Her last entry, Dad. She was scared of you, of what you'd become. And I. Christine slid down to sit with her back against the door. I became just like you. Christine, listen to me. No, I'm done listening. I'm done being your weapon. Whatever Carson's planning, whatever's about to happen, you're on your own. She ended the call and sat in the silence, her father pounding on the door and shouting until eventually a neighbor threatened to call the police, and he left. Christine pulled out her phone and found the number Carson had called from earlier. She didn't know if he'd answer, didn't know if he'd care what she had to say. But she had to try. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. What? It's me. Don't hang up. Please. Silence. But he didn't disconnect. I know what my father did to you, she said. The frame-up. The conviction. All of it. I know why you married me. Do you? His voice was ice. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I need you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For being part of this. Her voice broke. For becoming him. You had choices, Christine. Every day you had choices. I know. Your mother tried to do the right thing, and it cost her everything. You saw what he was, and you chose to help him anyway. I know, she whispered. So why are you calling? Because whatever you're planning, whatever revenge you have coming, I won't fight it. I won't help him anymore. And if there's anything I can do to make this right, even a fraction of it, tell me. Carson was quiet for a long moment. There is something. What? Tell the truth. When the time comes, when everything falls apart, tell the truth about all of it. Your father, your mother, what you helped him do. Don't run, don't hide, don't make excuses. Just tell the truth. I will. I promise. We'll see. He hung up. Christine sat with her phone, tears streaming down her face, and wondered if redemption was even possible for someone like her. The next morning, she drove to her medical practice, or what was left of it. Earl had mortgaged it to nothing, taking loans against her name to fund his lifestyle. The building would likely be sold to cover the debts. Her receptionist, Maura Mays, looked up in surprise. Dr. Black? I didn't think you were coming in today. I need to see the financial records. All of them. Maura hesitated. Your father said. My father doesn't work here. I do. Please. For the next 3 hours, Christine went through every document, every loan, every transfer. The picture that emerged was devastating. Earl had been systematically draining her practice for years, using her credentials and signature, sometimes forged, to secure money that went straight into his accounts. She'd been so focused on helping him con Carson that she'd never noticed she was being conned herself. Her phone rang. Lucas Phillips. Dr. Black? I'm a friend of Carson's. We need to talk. They met at a coffee shop, Lucas sliding a manila envelope across the table. Carson asked me to give you this. Inside were copies of everything Douglas Berry had uncovered. Earl's bribes, his crimes, the circumstances of her mother's death. And at the bottom, a note in Carson's handwriting. You wanted to know the truth. Here it is. You're not the only victim, but you were old enough to know better. Choose what you do with this information wisely. See, Christine read through the files, her hands shaking. Case after case of innocent people Earl had convicted for money. Families destroyed, lives ruined, all for his greed. And Carson, sweet, damaged Carson who'd held her at night and whispered that he loved her, had been one of them. How long has he been planning this? She asked Lucas. Years. Before he even met you. He must hate me. Lucas considered this. I don't think it's that simple. I think he wanted to, but Carson's not built for simple hate. He's built for justice. What's going to happen to my father? That depends. The FBI gets this file tomorrow. But Carson's offered Gino Briggs immunity for testimony. If Gino flips, Earl's looking at 20 to 30 years federal time. And me. Carson says that's up to you. You can run, try to escape the fallout. Or you could do what he asked, tell the truth. Christine looked at the files, at the evidence of her father's crimes, and made her choice. I'll testify, she said, against all of them. My father, Gino, everyone involved. I'll tell them everything. Lucas nodded slowly. That won't be easy. Nothing about this is easy. She stood, taking the envelope. But it's the only thing left that I can do. That evening, Christine drove to her father's house. The one she'd helped buy, the one funded by corruption and theft. Earl answered the door, his expression wary. You here to apologize? He asked. No, she said. I'm here to tell you that it's over. Carson has evidence of everything you've done. The FBI is getting it tomorrow. Gino's going to testify against you. And so am I. Earl's face went white, then red. You wouldn't dare. I already have. She handed him copies of the files. Mom was right about you. You're a monster. And I'm done being your daughter. She walked away from his shouting, got in her car, and drove until she reached Lake Michigan. She sat on the shore, watching the water, and called the one person she thought might understand. Carson, it's me again. I wanted you to know I told him. I'm going to testify. I'm going to make this right, or as right as it can be. Silence, then why? Because I need to be better than what he made me. Because those people he hurt deserve justice. Because my mother deserved better. And because she took a shaky breath. Because you deserved better than what we did to you. Christine. His voice softened just slightly. This doesn't change anything between us. I know, but maybe it changes something in me. She hung up and sat by the water until dawn, watching the sun rise over the city, thinking about the woman she'd been and the woman she might still become. Chapter 6. The Truth Emerges. Gino Briggs walked into Douglas Berry's office at 9 a.m. sharp, a briefcase full of evidence and the desperate look of a man who'd finally realized he was drowning. I'll testify, he said without preamble. Against Earl, against everyone. But I want full immunity. Barry, a silver-haired man with eyes that had seen everything and forgiven nothing, gestured to a chair. Sit. Talk. Start from the beginning. For the next 4 hours, Gino detailed every crime Earl Page had committed in the 15 years they'd worked together. Financial fraud, witness tampering, evidence fabrication, bribery. The recorder spun silently, capturing every word. When he finished, Barry leaned back. That's good. Very good. But I need one more thing. What? I need you to help me understand Carson Black's case, specifically. The one from 10 years ago. Gino nodded slowly. Marcus Lane was running a car theft ring out of 3 chop shops. Carson Black worked at one of the legitimate garages Lane used as a front. Kid had no idea what was happening. When the DA started sniffing around, Lane needed a fall guy, and Earl provided one. For $10,000. Lane planted evidence in Carson's apartment, paid 2 guys to testify they'd bought stolen parts from him, and Earl made sure the conviction stuck. He'd never had a chance. Where's Lane now? Dead. Killed in a prison fight about 5 years ago. Convenient. Barry made a note. And Earl knew Carson was innocent. Of course he knew. That was the whole point. Find someone clean, someone without the connections to fight back, and frame them. Earl did it at least a dozen times over the years. Barry nodded and shut off the recorder. Okay, you'll testify to all of this in front of a grand jury. In exchange, we'll recommend immunity on the fraud charges related to Carson. But Gino, if you're lying, if you hold anything back, the deal disappears. I'm not lying. I'm done protecting Earl Page. The man's a shark, and sharks eat their own when they're hungry enough. While Gino was confessing, Carson sat in a conference room across town with FBI Special Agent Ruth Boone, who'd been investigating judicial corruption for 2 years and was very interested in what Douglas Berry had sent her. This is explosive, Boone said, leafing through the files. Why did you wait so long to come forward? Because I wanted it to be airtight. Earl Page has connections, judges, lawyers, cops. I needed enough evidence that no one could help him. No deals, no favors, no walking away. And the attempted fraud against you? The marriage to his daughter? Carson smiled coldly. The daughters agreed to testify. The lawyers flipped. And I've got video evidence of every step of their plan. They tried to steal $7 million from me. Instead, they handed me the rope to hang them with. Boone studied him. You know, Mr. Black, most people in your position would have just gone to the police after discovering Page's crimes. Most people didn't spend 5 years in prison for something they didn't do. Most people didn't lose their 20s, their parents' funerals, their chance at a normal life because a corrupt judge needed $10,000. Fair enough. She closed the file. We'll convene a grand jury within the week. Earl Page will be indicted on multiple counts of corruption, bribery, fraud, and, based on new evidence we'll be examining, potentially criminally negligent homicide in the death of his wife. Good. And you, Mr. Black? What do you want out of this? Carson thought about the question. 5 years in a cage. 3 years playing a role. A lifetime of being careful, of trusting no one, of building walls so high nothing could hurt him again. I want Earl Page to understand what he stole from me. I want every person he convicted to have a chance at appeal. I want his name to be synonymous with corruption. And I want to watch him realize that all his power, all his connections, all his money, none of it can save him now. Boone nodded. We can arrange most of that. By the end of the week, the news had exploded. Retired judge arrested in massive corruption scandal screamed the headlines. Earl Page's smiling photo, taken at a charity gala he'd attended the month before, was plastered across every news outlet. The charges were extensive: 16 counts of bribery, 12 counts of evidence tampering, fraud, racketeering, and 1 count of criminally negligent homicide in the death of Aileen Page. Christine testified before the grand jury for 6 hours, her voice steady as she detailed everything she knew about her father's operations, including her own role in the attempted fraud against Carson. "I was complicit," she told the prosecutors. "I knew what kind of man my father was, and I helped him anyway. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for a chance to do the right thing, even if it's late." The DA offered her immunity in exchange for her testimony. Carson had specifically requested it, not because he'd forgiven her, but because she was useful and because some small part of him recognized that Earl had poisoned her from childhood. She'd accepted the immunity with the understanding that she'd lose her medical license, her practice, and likely her freedom if she ever stepped out of line again. Lucas called Carson the night the arrest was made. "It's done. He's in custody." Carson sat in his real apartment, not the facade he'd shared with Christine, but his actual home, a modest loft where he kept his books and his memories and the life he'd built in secret, and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. "You okay?" Lucas asked. "I don't know. I thought this would feel different. Justice usually does. The fantasy is better than the reality." Carson hung up and poured himself a bourbon, standing at the window and watching the city lights. Tomorrow, he'd start the process of reclaiming his name, of helping the other people Earl had convicted, of rebuilding something real from the ruins of his revenge. Tonight, he just felt tired. His phone buzzed. "Christine, I know I'm not supposed to contact you. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing. I don't expect forgiveness, but thank you." Carson stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without response. Some wounds ran too deep for forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to define everything that came after. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The trial of Earl Page began on a cold Monday in February, 6 weeks after his arrest. The prosecution, led by a bulldog DA named Maxwell Acevedo, had assembled a case so comprehensive that even Earl's expensive lawyers, paid for by mortgaging everything he had left, advised him to take a plea deal. Earl refused. "I'm a judge," he said, as if the title itself was armor. "They can't convict me." Carson attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row of the gallery where Earl could see him. The first time their eyes met, Earl's expression twisted with such pure hatred that a bailiff moved closer. Carson just smiled. The prosecution called witness after witness. Gino Briggs, who detailed the fraud schemes with cold precision. Christine, who testified about her father's manipulation and her mother's death. Douglas Berry, who walked the jury through years of financial records and payoffs. And then, on the 5th day, they called Carson. He took the stand wearing a simple suit, his hands steady as he was sworn in. Acevedo approached with a file. "Mr. Black, please tell the jury about the events of March 15th, 2015. Carson took a breath. "That was the day I was arrested for running a car theft ring. I was 23 years old, working as a mechanic, trying to save money for night school. I'd never been in trouble with the law before." "And you were guilty of these charges?" "No, sir. I was completely innocent. The evidence was planted, the witnesses were paid, and I was convicted by a judge who'd accepted a bribe to make sure I went to prison." Earl's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Carson continued, describing the trial, the conviction, the 5 years he'd spent in prison while his parents died without him there, while his life was stolen. "When did you learn about Judge Page's corruption?" Acevedo asked. 2 years after I got out. I hired an investigator to look into my case, wondering if there was any way to appeal. That's when I learned about the bribe, about Marcus Lane, about all of it. "And what did you do with that information?" "I started planning. I learned everything I could about Earl Page, his finances, his family, his methods. I built a life, made money, became the kind of person who could move in his circles. And then I married his daughter." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge gavelled for order. "You married Christine Page as part of a plan for revenge?" Acevedo asked. "Yes. And did you love her?" Carson paused. The first time his composure cracked. I told myself I didn't. That was all an act. But somewhere along the way, it got complicated. How so? She was a victim too. Earl poisoned her, shaped her into what he needed. I was angry at her for helping him, but I also understood that she'd been trapped by him her whole life. Love? I don't know. But I didn't hate her the way I hated him. He looked directly at Earl. Him, I hated with everything I had. The cross-examination was brutal. Earl's lawyer painted Carson as a vengeful ex-con who'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to frame an innocent man. Isn't it true, Mr. Black, that you manipulated my client's daughter? That you targeted her specifically to hurt her father? Yes. And you admit to planning and executing a multi-year campaign of deception? Yes. So we're supposed to believe that a man who spent years lying, who married a woman under false pretenses, who admits to being motivated by revenge, we're supposed to trust his testimony. Carson leaned forward. You can verify every single thing I've said. The financial records, the witness statements, the evidence Douglas Berry uncovered. None of that came from me. It's all documented fact. My motivations don't change Earl Page's crimes. The lawyer pressed on, but Carson didn't waver. He'd spent 3 years preparing for this, living lies so smoothly they became second nature. A courtroom cross-examination was nothing. Christine testified next, corroborating Carson's account and adding details about her father's manipulation, her mother's death, the fraud scheme they planned together. Why did you agree to help your father? Acevedo asked. Because I was scared of him. Because I've been taught my whole life that loyalty to family was everything. Because, she looked at Earl, tears streaming. Because I didn't know how to be anything other than what he made me. And now I know better. Now I understand that family doesn't mean enabling evil. It means standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Earl's lawyer tried to destroy her on cross, but Christine had already destroyed herself in her opening testimony. There was nothing left to take. The defense's case was weak. Character witnesses who testified to Earl's integrity, colleagues who spoke about his distinguished career. But against the mountain of evidence, they sounded hollow. On the 12th day, both sides rested. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Earl Page stood as the verdict was read, his face ashen. The judge, an old colleague who looked sick at having to sentence him, set a date for sentencing. Carson felt Lucas's hand on his shoulder. It's over. Not yet, Carson said. Chapter 8, Sentencing Day. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was packed for Earl Page's sentencing. Every person he'd wrongfully convicted, every family member of those victims, every reporter who'd covered the scandal, they all came to watch him fall. The judge allowed victim impact statements. One by one, people stood to tell their stories. A man who'd spent 12 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, missing his daughter's entire childhood. A woman whose husband had died in prison, convicted of drug trafficking on fabricated evidence. A young man, now 35, who'd been sentenced at 17 for a robbery he hadn't done, who'd aged out of prison without a family, without a future. Carson was the last to speak. He stood, walked to the podium, and looked at Earl Page, small now, diminished, the power stripped away. You stole 5 years of my life, Carson said quietly. 5 years I'll never get back. I miss my mother's funeral. My father died, thinking his son was a criminal. I lost my 20s, my innocence, my ability to trust. But you gave me something too, purpose. You taught me that justice doesn't come from courts or judges. It comes from people who refuse to let evil win. You taught me patience, planning, the value of playing the long game. So thank you, Judge Page. Thank you for making me strong enough to destroy you. Earl lunged forward, shouting obscenities, and had to be restrained by bailiffs. The judge gavelled for order. Mr. Page, the judge said when the room was quiet, you have disgraced your oath, your office, and the concept of justice itself. You've destroyed lives for money, used your power to oppress the innocent, and corrupted the very system designed to protect society. On 16 counts of bribery, 12 counts of evidence tampering, fraud, racketeering, and criminally negligent homicide, I sentence you to 45 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. The room erupted. Earl collapsed into his chair, his lawyers scrambling. 45 years, at his age, was a life sentence. Carson watched, feeling nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded him. Mr. Black, do you feel justice was served? Carson considered the question. Justice is complicated. Earl Page will spend the rest of his life in a cage, like he put me in a cage. Is that justice? Maybe, but it doesn't give me back what I lost. What will you do now? I'm starting a foundation to help other people Earl convicted. We're working with the Innocence Project to appeal every questionable case. Some of these people have been in prison for decades. They deserve a chance at freedom. And your marriage? Are you and Dr. Black? We're divorced. She's paid for her role in this. Leave her alone. He pushed through the crowd and found Lucas waiting with the car. You okay? Lucas asked as they drove away. I don't know. I got what I wanted. Earl's destroyed. The people he hurt have a chance at justice, and I've got my life back. But I feel empty. Yeah. Lucas drove in silence for a moment. Revenge is like that. You build it up in your head, imagine how it'll feel. But when it happens, it's just hollow. So what do I do now? You live. You build something real instead of something designed to hurt. You become more than the sum of your anger. Carson thought about that. About the foundation, about helping people. About maybe, someday, forgiving Christine for her role in this. About being more than the weapon he'd made himself into. Yeah, he said finally. Maybe you're right. Chapter 9. The Victor. 3 months later, Carson stood in the office of the Page Black Justice Foundation. He'd kept both names as a reminder and reviewed the progress. 12 of Earl's convictions had already been overturned. 16 more were in appeal. The foundation had hired 4 lawyers and 2 investigators, all working full-time to undo the damage Earl had done. It was expensive, exhausting work, but it was real. Lucas walked in with coffee. Heard from Ruth Boone this morning. 2 more cases looked promising. They found evidence that Earl suppressed exculpatory evidence in both. That's good. Carson signed off on a funding request. How's the fundraising? Strong. Turns out people like supporting a guy who took down a corrupt judge. You're basically Batman. Carson snorted. Batman doesn't marry the villain's daughter and lie to her for 3 years. Moral complexity. Very modern. The door opened, and Carson looked up to see Christine. He hadn't seen her since the divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. She looked different, thinner, tired, but somehow more solid. Like she'd found some core of herself that had been buried. I'm sorry to just show up, she said, but I wanted to give you this. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for $2 million. What? I sold the house, the practice building, everything I had left. This is half. The other half is going to a fund for victims of domestic violence, for women like my mother who are trapped by abusive men. Carson stared at the check. Christine, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I helped my father hurt people. This doesn't make it right, but it's a start. She met his eyes. I'm also volunteering with the foundation, if you'll have me. I'm not a lawyer, but I can do admin work, phone calls, whatever helps. You don't need to punish yourself. I'm not. I'm trying to do better. To be better. She smiled slightly. You showed me that's possible, even for people like us. Carson looked at her. This woman he'd married to hurt her father, who'd tried to help destroy him, who'd finally found the courage to do the right thing. Okay, he said, but no special treatment. You work like everyone else. I wouldn't want it any other way. She left, and Lucas whistled low. That was unexpected. Yeah. You think you'll ever forgive her? Carson thought about the question. I don't know, but maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe the point is just moving forward. That evening, Carson drove to the prison where he'd spent 5 years. He parked outside, looking at the gray walls and razor wire, and thought about the young man who'd gone in, scared, angry, convinced the world was random and cruel. He'd been right about the cruelty, but he'd learned it wasn't random. Evil was deliberate, calculated, and it could be fought. He'd fought it. He'd won. And now, he had to figure out what victory actually meant. His phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Black? This is Hunter Weaver. I was convicted by Earl Page 12 years ago for armed robbery. I didn't do it. Your foundation sent me a lawyer, and they think they can prove it. I wanted to say thank you for giving me hope. Carson closed his eyes. You're welcome. We're going to get you out. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Because I know what it's like to be put in a cage for something you didn't do. And I know what it's like when someone actually gives a damn about getting you out. He hung up and sat in the silence, watching the prison, thinking about all the people still inside who deserved better. Earl Page had made him a weapon. Carson Black had chosen to become a shield instead. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Media wants to interview you about the foundation.